Tonight, you travel to District 12 and the capital during the 74th Hunger Games. On Reaping Day in District 12, Katniss Everdeen stands among the children of the Seam as the capital selects its tributes. Her sister's name is called, and within moments Katniss is traveling towards the capital, the cameras, and an arena prepared for 24 young people. Before dawn, on the morning of the 74th Reaping, District 12 lies beneath a pale summer sky. You are standing in the Seam, where the cold has settled over the narrow streets and turned every breath into a faint white cloud. Cold dust darkens the windowsills, the door frames, and the faded clothes hanging beside small kitchen fires. Somewhere nearby, a kitchen door gives a long wooden creak, followed by the muted footsteps of adults moving carefully through cramped rooms. The town has begun to wake, though nothing feels ordinary. The reaping waits in the square under capital supervision, and every household in District 12 has reason to remain quiet. In a small house at the edge of the Seam, Katniss Everdeen opens her eyes before the light enters the room. She is 16 years old, and the 74th Hunger Games has already begun to occupy the silence around her. Before she thinks of the square, the cameras, or the names written on paper, she turns towards the bed where her younger sister sleeps. Primrose Everdeen is 12, pale-haired, and curled beneath a thin blanket with one hand resting near her cheek. You can hear the faint rhythm of Prim's breathing beneath the distant murmur of the loudspeakers. The capital's voice travels over District 12 in fragments, softened by distance and broken by walls. It announces instructions that everybody already knows. Children must gather. Families must attend. The square must be orderly. The glass bowl must remain untouched until the appointed moment. Outside, cold dust clings to the damp stones, while the grey morning presses gently against every window. Katniss lies still for a little while, watching the first dimness gather along the ceiling. Her father died several years before the reaping, in a mining accident deep beneath District 12. The mine took him suddenly, leaving behind a silence that seemed larger than the house itself. After his death, Katniss's mother became emotionally withdrawn, as though grief had carried her somewhere beyond the reach of ordinary speech. Katniss had been forced to grow older quickly because Prim still needed food, warmth, and someone who would stay. The kitchen waits beyond the narrow passage. You move with Katniss through the quiet house, feeling the chill beneath your feet and hearing each careful board answer with a soft complaint. The kitchen door creaks when she pushes it open. On the table sit 2 small pieces of bread, a little cheese, and the remnants of yesterday's boiled cabbage. There is no abundance here, only an arrangement of necessities. In District 12, survival often depends upon noticing what remains. Katniss checks the stove, then glances towards her mother's room. Her mother is awake, but she does not rise immediately. Her face has the distant stillness that followed her husband's death, and her movements remain slow even after several years. Katniss does not ask for comfort. She has learned that questions can fall into the silence without finding an answer. Instead, she sets aside the larger piece of bread for Prim and begins preparing the small meal with quiet precision. The cold air over the Seam slips through gaps around the window panes, carrying the faint mineral smell of coal. Grey light rests on the table, on the chipped cups, and on a single spoon marked with scratches. Along the walls, the morning remains motionless. You hear a bucket being lifted somewhere outside, then the soft drag of a broom over stone. From farther away, the loudspeakers carry the capital's voice again, smooth and distant, as though the words have crossed an enormous room. Katniss learned long ago that the woods beyond District 12 offered a different kind of silence. Their hunger had rules that could be understood. A rabbit left tracks. A squirrel disturbed a branch. Edible plants grew beneath the trees, and clean water gathered in places remembered from one season to the next. Katniss learned to hunt with a bow and arrows, first clumsily and later with an accuracy that kept her family alive. Hunting, gathering, and bartering became the quiet foundation beneath their fragile household. You can picture the bow resting in its usual place, wrapped in cloth and hidden where careless eyes will not find it. The arrows lie beside it, straightened, sharpened, and repaired whenever necessary. Their wood carries the faint scent of resin, while the bowstring feels rough against the fingers. Beyond the last houses, the forest waits beneath a crust of frost. Branches hold the night's moisture. The ground is dark with leaves. A distant bird calls once, then becomes silent. Gale Hawthorne is Katniss's closest hunting companion. He is older than she is, broad-shouldered, observant, and familiar with the same paths through the woods. Together, Katniss and Gale have learned where snares can be placed and which streams remain clear after rain. They have traded game for bread, traded gathered plants for salt, and carried home enough food to make another day possible. The woods do not make them safe, but they provide a form of security that the seam cannot offer. The memory of Gale settles beside Katniss as she returns to the kitchen. They have spoken about the reaping many times without saying very much. Each year brings the same ceremony, the same glass bowl, and the same fear beneath the official language. Children may receive additional entries in exchange for tesserae, and tesserae provide grain and oil for one person in a household for 1 year. A family can accept the bargain, but the price is another chance for a name to be called. Outside, the grey streets begin to fill. You hear muted footsteps passing beneath the window, slower than usual and carefully measured. Adults keep their heads lowered. Children walk close to their parents or older siblings. Coal dust marks the hems of dresses and the cuffs of trousers, making the entire seam appear dressed in one color. Doors open and close. A cough sounds behind a wall. Somewhere, a baby begins to cry and is gently quieted. Katniss wakes Prim with a touch to her shoulder. Prim opens her eyes at once, already aware of the day. She is 12 when she first becomes eligible for the reaping, and the knowledge has altered the shape of her sleep. 12 is young enough to remain small in the family's mind, yet old enough to stand among the other children beneath the Capitol's cameras. Katniss tells her to dress warmly, though Prim's clothes are already laid out beside the bed. The sisters prepare without speaking much. You feel the faint roughness of the fabric as Prim fastens her collar and smooths the front of her dress. Katniss ties back her hair, checks the seams of Prim's shoes, and folds a clean cloth into the younger girl's pocket. Their mother remains in the other room, quiet and still. The creak of the kitchen door comes again as Katniss crosses to collect the bread. The house seems to hold its breath around them. A thin drizzle has passed over the seam during the night, leaving the roofs dark and the streets damp. Water glimmers along shallow channels between the stones. Coal dust has gathered in the puddles, staining them the color of weak tea. The morning air moves across your face with a dry, penetrating cold. On the windows, moisture blurs the outlines of the houses opposite, where other families are completing the same small preparations. Katniss gives Prim the larger piece of bread. Prim hesitates, then accepts it with both hands. Their mother watches from the doorway, her expression difficult to read. For an instant, Katniss remembers the time when her mother sang while preparing breakfast, before the mind took her husband and grief withdrew her from the living world. The memory passes without comfort. Katniss gathers her coat, takes Prim's hand, and leads her towards the street. The walk to the square carries them through the divided structure of District 12. The seam lies on one side, its houses crowded together beneath the shadow of the mines. Beyond it stands the merchant area, where the streets are wider and the buildings better kept. The distinction is visible in the windows, in the condition of the coats, and in the way people hold themselves. Yet on reaping morning, the seam and the merchant area move towards one destination beneath the same surveillance. You pass houses with shutters closed against the cold and shop fronts where no one has yet lifted the blinds. A bakery gives off a mild scent of yeast and warm flour. which drifts briefly into the street before fading beneath the smell of wet coal. Metal gutters tick as water falls from them. A cart rolls over uneven ground. Above the rooftops, loudspeakers continue to carry the capital's voice, announcing the hour with polished certainty. Children move in groups along the road. Some wear borrowed clothes, their sleeves too long or their collars too broad. Others stand beside parents who say almost nothing. Katniss keeps Prim close, her fingers wrapped firmly around the girl's hand. The younger girl's palm is cold. You notice the small tremor passing through it, then the deliberate effort to become still. Katniss walks with her shoulders squared, while the square grows nearer beyond the buildings. At the edge of the merchant area, the streets become cleaner, though the air remains sharp with smoke. Painted doors replace bare wood. Window glass reflects the pale sky. A few children wear bright ribbons, arranged by families who wish to preserve the appearance of dignity. Katniss and Prim continue among them without looking aside. The reaping selects one female and one male tribute from each district, and every person gathered understands that the two chosen children will not return as they came. The town square has been prepared beneath a broad arrangement of capital banners. A temporary stage stands at one end, with two microphones, a lectern, and a pair of glass bowls placed upon a table. Cameras sit on raised platforms around the open space. Peacekeepers watch from the edges in white uniforms, their faces unreadable beneath polished helmets. You can feel their presence before you look directly at them, a quiet pressure along the crowd's skin. The glass bowls catch the thin morning light. Paper slips move inside them when the wind touches the table, sliding softly against one another. The sound is almost delicate, like dry leaves stirred beneath a doorway. Every slip bears a name. Every name belongs to a child whose life has been measured against grain and oil, against hunger, and against the needs of a family that could not always refuse the offer of tessery. Katniss finds a place with Prim among the girls from the seam. The children stand in ordered rows, separated according to age and sex. Prim is placed among the 12-year-old girls, where her small figure appears even smaller between taller children. Katniss is directed towards the older girls. She looks back once. Prim tries to smile. The gesture is so trusting that Katniss feels a sudden pain beneath her ribs. You stand beneath the open sky with the crowd pressed quietly around you. The banners stir above the stage, making a soft, repetitive sound. Cameras turn on their mounts. A peacekeeper's boot shifts against the stone. From the loudspeakers comes the capital's voice, bright and composed, traveling over the square and into every house beyond it. The cold reaches through coats and sleeves, while the smell of damp wool rises from the gathered families. The mayor steps towards the lectern and begins the familiar history of Panem. His words describe the dark days, the rebellion, the destruction that followed, and the creation of the Hunger Games as a reminder of capital authority. The speech is delivered each year, with only small changes in emphasis. Katniss has heard it before. You hear the polished phrases pass over the square, carried by wires, speakers, and the careful attention of the cameras. A screen behind the stage displays the seal of Panem. Beneath it, the names of the districts appear in formal lettering. District 12 is introduced as a coal-producing district, though the words sound cleaner than the mines themselves. Katniss knows what coal does to skin, cloth, lungs, and windowsills. She knows how its dust settles into the folds of a house. She also knows that the capital's prosperity depends upon work performed beneath the ground. The mayor's voice continues while the children stand motionless. You notice a girl rubbing her thumb against the side of her finger. A boy swallows and looks towards the cameras. Near the back of the square, an older woman holds a black scarf over her mouth. The glass bowls remain on the table, one for girls and one for boys. The paper slips inside them, light enough to turn with the smallest movement of air. Effie Trinket, the capital representative assigned to District 12, comes forward in a green dress and a pale wig. Her clothing seems unsuited to the weather, but she carries herself as though the cold belongs to another country. She smiles towards the cameras, consults her notes, and repeats the formal language of the ceremony. Around her, the machinery of the games remains visible in every direction, from the cameras to the peacekeepers and the sealed bowls. Katniss watches Effie place one gloved hand above the bowl containing the girls' names. The paper slips shift beneath the glass, overlapping and separating in quiet layers. Prim stands far across the square, her shoulders narrow beneath her coat. Katniss remembers washing Prim's hair, mending her sleeves, and bringing home a small goat when there seemed to be no other way to keep her alive. The memory of that goat feels impossibly gentle beneath the banners. The crowd becomes still enough for small sounds to emerge. A child's shoe scrapes the stone. A camera clicks. Cloth brushes against cloth. Somewhere beyond the square, a mine cart groans on its track. The loudspeakers carry the capital's voice with perfect clarity now, and every word seems to settle upon the gathered children like another layer of cold. Katniss keeps her eyes fixed on Prim, as though attention alone could form a shield. Effie reaches into the glass bowl. Her hand disappears among the folded slips, and the papers rustle against the sides. She lifts one name between two fingers, holds it beneath the light, and unfolds it with practiced care. The sound of paper opening is small, but it travels through the square. You can almost hear the crowd lean towards it, all those bodies waiting for a single word. Effie says the name Primrose Everdeen. For one moment, the words do not belong to anyone. They seem to hover above the square, detached from the child standing among the 12-year-old girls. Then Prim's face changes, and Katniss hears the name again inside herself. Primrose Everdeen. Prim, her sister. The younger girl who still leaves flowers in cups, who sleeps beside a stuffed toy, and who has never held a bow in the deep woods. The crowd parts as Prim begins to move. Her steps are uncertain, but she walks towards the stage. Katniss sees the pale braid at the back of her head and the small cloth in her pocket. She sees the cameras turning to follow her. She hears someone whisper the name of the girl who has been chosen. Prim reaches the open space between the rows, and the distance between the sisters becomes unbearable. You feel the cold against your cheeks as Katniss steps forward. Her body moves before thought can catch it. A hand catches at her sleeve, then loses its grip. The peacekeepers turn towards the disturbance. Prim looks back over her shoulder, frightened now, and Katniss says her name aloud. The sound is swallowed by the square, but Prim hears it. She stops. The cameras remain fixed upon both sisters. Katniss reaches Prim and takes her place in front of the younger girl. The child's fingers close around hers with desperate strength. Around them, the crowd remains under the capital's attention. The stage rises only a short distance away, yet it seems separated by a vast, empty country. On the table, the remaining paper slips lie folded and quiet inside the glass bowl. Beyond the square, District 12 continues to breathe through its cold, dark streets. Effie calls for order, and the mayor lowers his eyes. Katniss hears the formal words of the ceremony, though they no longer carry meaning. Prim is 12. Katniss is 16. The games require one female tribute and one male tribute from District 12, and the first name has already been taken. Katniss looks at Prim's frightened face and understands that every rule has narrowed to one simple fact. She steps towards the stage. The morning grows quieter around you. The banners move above the square. Fine rain touches the stone. Prim's hand slips away. The air smells of coal, wet wool, and distant smoke. Katniss climbs the steps slowly. Her boots make a soft sound against the wood. Below, the glass bowl catches the grey light. There is no shelter in the square. There is only the pale sky, the silent crowd, and the name Primrose Everdeen resting inside every listening mind. The morning grows quieter around you. Banners move above the square, and fine rain touches the stone. Prim's hand slips away. The air carries coal smoke, wet wool, and distant river mist. Katniss climbs the steps slowly, her boots making a muted sound against the boards. Below her, the glass bowl gathers grey daylight beneath its curved surface. Effie Trinket stands beside it, bright and composed, her carefully arranged hair and polished clothing appearing almost unreal against District 12 dark coats. The microphone waits before her, its metal body dull beneath the pale sky. Its dry rasp will soon carry a name across the square. There is no shelter in the open space, no wall between the families and the ceremony, and no way to return Primrose Everdeen to the place where she had been standing. Effie Trinket lifts the small card from the bowl, holding it between two gloved fingers. She unfolds the paper with the patience of someone performing a familiar household task, though the square understands that it contains a life. The name is written clearly. Primrose Everdeen. Katniss hears it once, then again inside the sudden stillness that follows. Prim remains near the edge of the crowd, small beneath the pale sky, her plate lying against the back of her dress. Her face has lost its color. For one brief moment, Katniss sees the child she has protected through hunger, illness, cold rooms, and evenings when the family had nothing left to eat. Then she crosses the stage, moving before thought can become fear. Light rests upon the polished reaping stage, revealing scratches beneath its varnish and small pools of rain caught between the wooden boards. The microphone gives a dry rasp when Effie's hand approaches it, and the sound travels strangely through the square. Around you, shoulders remain lifted, as though the crowd has forgotten how to breathe. A child's sleeve presses against your arm, damp and coarse from the weather. Somewhere behind the buildings, a cart wheel turns once before stopping. The banners above the square make a faint, heavy movement in the wind. Their colors appear thin beneath the washed light, while the grey clouds hold the morning close to the ground. No one speaks Prim's name aloud. The silence carries it more gently than any voice could have done. Katniss reaches Prim before the officials can move towards her. She pushes through the bodies with both hands, hearing someone call her name and another person draw breath sharply. Prim turns, and Katniss gathers her into the warmth and roughness of her embrace. Prim's arms close around her waist, and the small body trembles against her. Katniss speaks without planning the words, telling Prim that everything will be all right, although the promise has no shape or strength behind it. Peacekeepers approach. Their white uniforms appear at the edges of the crowd, clean and distant. Katniss feels Prim being drawn away, and the space between them becomes unbearable. Then she straightens, turns towards the stage, and gives the only answer that seems possible. She volunteers to take Prim's place. A sound begins somewhere among the people, almost too quiet to identify. It is not a cry or the ordinary murmur of a crowd waiting for instructions. The three fingers of one hand rise beside a worn cap, then another hand follows, and another. Across District 12, the three-fingered salute passes through the square like a slow current. You see it beside patched coats, miners' jackets, faded scarves, and the stiff uniforms of those who cannot join it. The gesture carries respect and mourning together. It does not alter the law, yet it changes the silence surrounding it. The open square seems to hold the raised hands in place. Rain darkens the cuffs of sleeves, while the daylight remains faintly visible on the stage. For one quiet instant, public grief becomes a form of resistance. Effie Trinket looks towards Katniss with surprise carefully contained beneath ceremony. She asks for her name, though everyone in the square knows it. Katniss Everdeen. The microphone gives another dry rasp, and her answer enters the cold air. Her voice sounds smaller than the act itself. Effie announces that Katniss is the female tribute from District 12, and the words settle over the families like ash. Katniss looks towards Prim, who is crying against their mother's shoulder. The three-fingered salute lowers gradually, leaving behind the memory of many hands held in the same position. Katniss remains on the stage, while Effie turns back towards the glass bowl. The ceremony has not finished. One child has been spared, and another life has been placed where hers had stood. The polished boards beneath your feet are cold through your boots, their surface shining with a thin skin of rain. Daylight moves over the stage in a weak band, touching the glass bowl and the brass edge of the microphone. It catches Effie's pale gloves, then disappears behind the clouds. Across the square, wet wool gives off a heavy animal smell, mingling with coal dust carried from the seam. The air remains still after the salute, though the banners continue their slow movement overhead. Prim's sobs reach you only as broken threads between the creak of leather and the shift of boots. You feel the boards vibrate faintly when someone climbs the steps behind you. The ceremony gathers itself again, cold and formal, as though grief must wait until the names have all been spoken. Effie Trinket reaches into the bowl a second time. Katniss watches her hand disappear among the folded slips while the square waits for the male tribute. The paper is selected and opened. Peter Mellark. The name belongs to the son of a baker in District 12, a boy Katniss knew from school before the reaping. She remembers his broad shoulders in the classroom, his pale hair, and the quiet attention he gave to lessons. She remembers the bakery standing near the cleaner streets, where warm bread sometimes filled the air. Peter steps forward from the crowd. His face is composed, though his eyes reveal that he understands the distance between the stage and every ordinary afternoon. The baker's son becomes part of Katniss's unavoidable story. The smell of bread seems to linger among the sharper scents of rain and coal, although the bakery lies beyond the square and behind several rows of houses. You stand beneath a sky that has brightened without becoming warm. Water rests on the brim of a nearby hat, collecting until it slips down the wearer's cheek. The crowd shifts as Peter passes through it, producing a low friction of cloth and leather. A peacekeeper's boots strike the stone with measured weight. The glass bowl remains on the stage, empty now, except for its folded papers. Its surface reflects the pale light and the dark shapes of the people gathered below. Somewhere behind the station, coal smoke drifts low over the roofs, staining the morning with a familiar bitterness. Peter joins Katniss on the stage. Effie presents them as the two tributes from District 12, and the title sounds too neat for the lives it contains. Katniss looks at him, searching for some sign that the boy from school has disappeared. Instead, she sees the same steady face she remembers from the bakery. Years earlier, when her family was starving, Peter had given Katniss bread. He had thrown the loaves into the mud, allowing his mother's anger to become the reason for his generosity. Katniss had carried the bread home and fed Prim and her mother. She had understood the memory as an important debt, one that could never be entirely repaid. Now Peter stands beside her beneath the stage lights, and the debt takes on a new and dangerous shape. Your memory moves through the square like warmth remembered by the hands. You can almost feel the rough crust of bread beneath your fingers, hard at the edges and soft within. The imagined scent is rich with yeast, flour, and heat from the bakery ovens. Around you, the actual morning remains damp. Rain clings to the collars of coats, and the stones hold the cold from the night. Peter's shoes leave darker marks where they touch the boards. Katniss's sleeve brushes his, but neither tribute speaks. The microphone waits between them, its metal grill beaded with moisture. Beyond the peacekeepers, Prim's face remains turned towards the stage. Her tears catch the uncertain light, and the sight of them presses against every other sensation. The officials move the tributes towards the side of the stage. Katniss hears Effie speaking about photographs and departure arrangements, but the phrases pass over her without becoming meaningful. Peter walks with the measured calm of someone who has decided that panic will not help. Haymitch Abernathy appears near the steps, unsteady and unshaven, with the manner of a man pulled from a difficult sleep. He is District 12 surviving victor and official mentor. The title belongs to him by law, even if his posture suggests that the law has placed a burden upon someone already carrying too much. Haymitch looks at Katniss, then at Peter, and seems to recognize the shape of the spectacle awaiting them. The square begins to empty in uneven currents, though you remain held among the people for several moments longer. Wet footprints cross the stone, leading towards gates and narrow streets. The banners continue to hang above the stage, their cloth darkened along the lower seams. Daylight glances across the polished wood, while the clouds make its brightness seem borrowed. The microphone gives a faint crackle as an official switches it off. Without amplification, the voices around you become softer and more human. A woman whispers a prayer into her sleeve. A child asks whether the ceremony is over. Behind the station, coal smoke folds itself around the roofs, and the smell of iron rails grows stronger as the departure hour approaches. The tributes are taken away from the square after their selection. Katniss walks between peacekeepers, while Peter follows a short distance behind. Their path leads through a corridor of people who have gathered without permission to see them pass. Some faces turn away. Others remain fixed upon Katniss with a mixture of pity and fear. She searches for her mother and Prim, finding them near the steps of a municipal building. Prim breaks from their mother and runs towards her until a peacekeeper catches her. Katniss reaches through the space between them, and her fingers meet Prim's hand. She says goodbye to her mother and Prim before departure, though the words sound thin beside the weight of what is happening. The minutes compress family, guilt, and fear into hurried gestures. The rain has weakened, leaving the air cold and newly washed. Your face feels the dampness gathered beneath the clouds, and the rough weave of a coat brushes your shoulder as the crowd presses close. Coal smoke rises behind the station in long, wavering layers. It enters the streets, settles against brick walls, and mixes with the metallic scent of the tracks. Prim's embrace remains in the body as warmth remembered after separation. The wool of her dress had scratched Katniss's cheek, and her hair had smelled faintly of soap. Now the station doors stand ahead, dark glass reflecting figures without clear faces. The stones beneath you carry the distant tremor of machinery. Departure waits beyond the doors, patient and impersonal. Gale finds Katniss before she boards the train. His face is controlled, but his hands move restlessly as he speaks. He tells her that the capital expects a spectacle. The statement is practical, almost severe, because Gale understands that survival will depend upon more than strength. Katniss listens, while officials move around them and peacekeepers supervise the platform. Gale explains that those watching will want a story, an expression, and a reason to care. The capital expects fear to be arranged into entertainment, and the tributes must be presented as more than frightened children from a poor district. Katniss thinks of Peter's bread, Prim's tears, and the salute from the square. None of those things can now be separated from the spectacle. The platform smells of wet iron, coal smoke, and old timber warmed by the first uncertain daylight. A signal lamp glows through the mist, its color softened by moisture. You hear porters moving cases across the boards, each wheel producing a brief hollow knock. Beneath the platform, water gathers in narrow channels along the rail bed. The train waits with dark windows and a long metal body that reflects the sky in broken strips. Steam moves near the wheels, carrying a faint mineral heat across your hands. Somewhere inside the station, a clock marks the minutes with a muted mechanical sound. The platform seems both familiar and distant, as though the town has already begun to recede before the train moves. The tributes are placed under the authority of their escort and mentor. Effie Trinket supervises the arrangements with brisk concern, checking names, documents, and compartments. Haymitch Abernathy stands nearby, still bearing the careless appearance of a man who has forgotten how to present himself. He is unreliable in manner, yet indispensable in purpose. District 12 has only one surviving victor to guide its tributes, and his knowledge cannot be replaced by polished clothing or official language. Peter keeps his gaze lowered, while Katniss watches Haymitch. The mentor says little at first. His silence contains years of arenas, victories, losses, and the knowledge that the capital turns suffering into a public ceremony. Inside the station, the air is warmer than the square, though the warmth carries the dry smell of dust and old smoke. Your coat holds the rain against your skin, while the wooden benches give off a faint resinous scent. Voices echo beneath the high ceiling and break apart among the beams. Effie's shoes tap across the floor in quick, precise intervals. Haymitch's boots drag slightly, leaving a darker trail where water has gathered beneath them. Through the windows, the train appears in pieces, its metal sides blurred by condensation. The vibration beneath the floor grows more distinct as the engines begin to stir. It travels through your soles and up into your knees, announcing movement before the wheels have turned. Katniss enters the train with Peter, Effie, and Haymitch. The compartment is brighter than any room she has known at home, with polished surfaces, soft seats, and food arranged in quantities that seem almost offensive. She remains close to the doorway for a moment, looking back towards District 12. The station roof cuts the sky into a narrow strip, and beyond it lie the streets, the seam, the woods, and the house where Prim will sleep without her. Peter enters behind her and pauses in the same way. Haymitch moves towards the drinks, while Effie begins describing the schedule. The train doors close, carrying Katniss away from the only home she understands. The carriage holds the scent of varnished wood, clean linen, and food too rich to belong to the morning. Light passes across the windows in pale bands, changing whenever the train moves beneath a roof or beside a wall. You feel the seats yield beneath your weight, softer than the benches at home. A glass trembles on a table, producing a delicate sound against its coaster. Beyond the window, coal smoke trails beside the carriage and dissolves into the damp air. The rails create a deep, repeating rhythm beneath everything else, steady enough to blur the edges of thought. Each vibration travels through the floor, through the frame, and into the quiet spaces between words. The train gathers speed beyond the station. Katniss watches houses slide past, their roofs wet and their chimneys breathing thin smoke. The square disappears behind them, followed by the municipal buildings and the narrow roads leading towards the seam. She thinks of Prim's hand, her mother's frightened face, and the three-fingered salute rising through District 12. Peter sits across from her, the baker's son now bound to the same journey. Haymitch tells them that the capital will study every gesture, silence, and expression. Katniss understands that the reaping did not end when the names were called. It continues inside the train, where strangers begin shaping two lives into a story they can watch. Outside, the town loosens into fields edged by hedges and dark stands of trees. The sky remains a quiet sheet of silver, and water shines along the furrows where rain has settled. You feel the train's vibration change as it crosses a bridge, the rhythm briefly hollow beneath the wheels. Coal smoke curls along the rear windows, then thins as the wind takes it away. In the carriage, warmth gathers around the lamps and polished tables. The fabric beneath your fingers is smooth, but its softness feels unfamiliar after years of rough blankets and worn clothing. The scent of bread remains faintly present, woven through the richer aromas of meat, fruit, and coffee. Katniss remembers the day Peter gave her bread. Her father had died, her mother had withdrawn into grief, and the younger Prim had been too small to understand why hunger had become ordinary. Katniss had searched bins behind shops and gathered dandelions from the schoolyard. In the rain behind the bakery, Peter had burned 2 loaves deliberately, giving her the chance to take them. The bread had been warm enough to steam in the cold. Katniss had carried it home beneath her shirt, then watched Prim eat. That memory had remained an important debt, difficult to repay. Now Peter sits opposite her, and she cannot decide whether the debt asks for gratitude, protection, or something more difficult. The carriage rocks gently through the countryside, and the movement softens the sharper edges of the morning. Sunlight enters between cloud breaks, touching the table with a muted gold that soon fades. The windows hold blurred reflections of faces, lamps, and passing trees. You hear the low conversation of officials in another compartment, separated by a closed door and thick walls. Cutlery rests upon plates with small, careful sounds. The air is warm against your cheeks, yet the memory of the square remains cold. Peter's hands lie near the table's edge, broad and still. Katniss's fingers remain folded in her lap, while the rails carry them steadily away from home. Haymitch eventually looks directly at Katniss and Peter. He speaks of the coming interviews, the training, and the arrangements that will be made before the arena. His words are blunt, but beneath them lies a narrow path towards survival. Effie objects to his manners and asks him to behave with greater dignity. Haymitch dismisses the request with a tired gesture. He has survived the games, yet survival has not made him gentle, orderly, or easy to trust. Katniss recognizes that his weakness may conceal knowledge no one else possesses. The capital has created the role of mentor, and Haymitch remains the only person from District 12 who has lived through the place towards which the train is moving. The train passes beneath a long cutting where stone walls rise close to the windows. Light disappears, leaving the compartments lit by warm lamps and soft reflections. You hear the wheels strike each joint in the track, their repeated pattern filling the darkness. The glass trembles, and the table gives a low wooden creak beneath the dishes. When the train emerges, daylight returns across the windows with sudden gentleness. Farmland stretches beneath the clouds, divided by fences darkened with rain. The smell of coal smoke remains in the carriage, joined by polished wood and the faint sweetness of fruit. Beyond the glass, the world continues without ceremony. Katniss turns once more towards the window. District 12 has become a line of roofs, then a blur of smoke, then nothing that can be recognized. The train carries her towards the capital, towards strangers who will watch her fear and judge its entertainment value. Peter remains nearby, the memory of bread between them like a quiet obligation. Effie Trinket speaks about appearances, while Haymitch Abernathy listens with his eyes half closed. The reaping began beneath the pale light on the polished stage, with the dry rasp of a microphone and the name Primrose Everdeen. It continued through the salute, the goodbyes, and the closing doors. Now the vibration of the departing train carries Katniss into the next part of the story. Inside the moving carriage, the light settles into a calm pattern upon the walls and seats. The sound of the rails becomes deeper and more distant, though it remains present beneath every breath. Warm air passes through the vents with a faint whisper, carrying traces of coffee, linen, and bread. Your hands rest against the smooth arm of the seat, feeling each small tremor as the train crosses the countryside. Rainwater slips from branches beside the tracks and flashes briefly in the daylight. Coal smoke trails behind the last carriage, while the station and the square fall farther away. The morning continues beyond the windows, quiet and indifferent, as District 12 becomes only a name held in memory. The train carries you north from District 12, its wheels keeping a measured rhythm beneath the polished floor, while Katniss sits near the window and watches the familiar hills dissolve into distance. Peter rests across from her, quiet beneath Effie Trinket's careful attention, her bright clothes seeming strangely untouched by the grey morning. Haymitch occupies another seat, carrying the heavy silence of someone who has travelled this road many times in memory. Beyond the glass, the land opens into places Katniss has never been permitted to visit freely, though she has heard their names from traders, officials, and old men beside the hob. The train passes fields without fences, rivers crossed by iron bridges, and villages where chimneys rise cleanly above painted roofs. Each mile carries the three of you farther from District 12, while placing the capital more firmly ahead. Electric lights tremble in the train windows, appearing as pale reflections over fields washed with rain. Soft carpets lie beneath unfamiliar shoes, absorbing the small sounds of movement and making the carriage seem separated from the earth. Silver cutlery rests against porcelain plates, giving a delicate ringing whenever the train bends around a curve. The sweet smell of baked food moves through the air, mingling with coffee, warm linen, and the faint mineral scent of hot machinery. Beyond the glass, wet branches lean over the railway, their leaves flashing briefly beneath the changing light. The window remains cool beneath your hand, although the carriage itself is warm enough to loosen the stiffness in your shoulders. Somewhere behind the walls, servants move quietly between kitchens and dining rooms, while the rails continue their steady passage through the damp countryside. At the first meal, you see a table covered with more food than District 12 could gather for several celebrations, and the sight makes Katniss pause before choosing a seat. There are roasted meats, glazed vegetables, soft white rolls, soups carrying herbs she cannot name, and small cakes arranged beneath shining domes. Peter studies the table with open curiosity, while Effie explains each course as though abundance were an ordinary household habit. Haymitch reaches for a bottle and watches Katniss rather than the food, measuring what she understands and what she has yet to learn. The train provides comfort far beyond her normal experience, yet that comfort feels less like kindness than another room in which she is being observed. Capital excess fills the plates, surrounds the guests, and quietly announces the power of those who can waste what others cannot find. The porcelain holds the kitchen's warmth, and a thin mist rises from the soup whenever the carriage slows. Butter softens across the cut surfaces of the rolls, leaving a pale sheen beneath the electric lamps. Silver forks touch china with restrained little notes, while knives divide meat that yields without effort. The baked food gives off cinnamon, sugar, and browned crust, scents so rich that they seem almost visible in the narrow space. Upholstered seats press gently against your back, and the carpet beneath your feet feels thicker than any rug in District 12. A glass of water trembles beside the plate, catching fragments of light from the ceiling. Outside, the wet landscape becomes a blur of green and brown, and the train's warmth follows you northward like a temporary season. Haymitch advises you that surviving the public stages before the arena will require more than strength, because the capital wants stories that can be watched, remembered, and purchased. He tells Katniss to remain composed beside Peter, letting the audience believe in whatever tenderness they can understand, while concealing every thought that might be used against her. Effie Trinket adds instructions about posture, greetings, clothing, and the importance of appearing grateful without seeming desperate. Peter listens with a patience that makes him seem older than the train carriage, while Katniss studies Haymitch's face for signs of sincerity beneath the smell of alcohol. The journey itself has become part of the game's presentation, carrying the tributes through the country so that the capital may receive them as a procession. Even the silence between stations is shaped into part of the spectacle. The carriage settles around you with the softness of a closed room, though the engine sends occasional tremors through the walls. Warm air passes from the vents, carrying traces of roasted fruit and clean fabric. Shadows from telegraph poles move across the ceiling in long, regular bars, fading whenever the train enters a cutting. Effie's bracelets make a faint chime as she lifts her cup, and Haymitch's glass leaves a dark ring upon the polished table. Peter's sleeve brushes the upholstery when he turns towards the window, while Katniss keeps one hand near the edge of her plate. The electric lights remain bright despite the afternoon clouds, their reflections floating over the darkening pane. Far below the carriage, the wheels strike each joint in the track with a patient metallic pulse, and the whole train seems to breathe through its vents. Near the end of the journey, the capital begins to appear through the windows, first as distant towers, and then as a gathering of white buildings, bridges, and shining surfaces. Katniss has imagined the city as a place of power, but its brightness exceeds the picture formed by stories from District 12. Peter watches beside her, and the two of you see roads crowded with vehicles, tree-lined avenues, and crowds waiting beyond barriers to glimpse the tributes. Effie becomes more animated as the train approaches, speaking about schedules and ceremonies, while Haymitch reminds Katniss that the cameras have already begun recording. People on the platforms raise their hands, their faces turning towards the carriage, as though the train contains something rare. Capital pageantry receives the district children before they have even stepped into the streets. Station lamps shine across the polished sides of the train, scattering gold and white over the wet platform. The air smells of rain, hot metal, and smoke from the engine, with a sharper sweetness rising from nearby stalls. Voices gather beneath the roof and break apart against the iron arches, creating a restless murmur without any single sentence becoming clear. Uniformed attendants wait beside the doors, their gloves pale against the dark fabric of their coats. Effie's perfume forms a bright floral layer above the coal smoke, while Peter's shoulder remains warm where it touches yours. The train windows hold electric reflections of lamps, faces, and moving umbrellas. Beneath the station roof, every surface seems designed to gleam, and the soft carpets inside the carriage make the rough platform feel like another country. Cinna and Portia are assigned as the stylists for District 12, and you meet them in rooms arranged for fittings, measurements, and careful transformation. Portia speaks with warmth, though her clothing carries the refined confidence of the capital, while Cinna seems quieter, simpler, and more attentive than those around him. He becomes Katniss's principal stylist, observing her grey eyes, dark hair, and guarded manner whenever strangers enter the room. Cinna does not try to make her resemble a capital girl, nor does he hide the place from which she has come. Instead, he begins shaping an image that the capital can recognize, drawing upon the association between District 12, coal, and fire. Peter stands nearby while the garments are discussed, and the two of you understand that clothing will become another form of speech. Fabric slides over your arms with a dry whisper, while pins gather cloth at the shoulders, beneath the stylish white lamps. The room smells faintly of starch, heated metal, and unfamiliar oils used to polish leather and buttons. Cinna's hands move with calm precision, lifting a seam, adjusting a collar, and studying the effect before making another small alteration. Portia arranges dark material beside deep red cloth, allowing the colors to suggest coal beneath a banked flame. Mirrors return the room from several angles, multiplying the racks, lamps, and solemn faces gathered around the fittings. Somewhere beyond the walls, machinery hums inside the building, carrying heat through concealed pipes. You feel each garment settle differently across your body, and the sensation of being dressed becomes inseparable from the sensation of being prepared. The opening ceremony gathers all 24 tributes before the capital audience, placing the children from 12 districts upon chariots that move through a city built for looking. Katniss and Peter appear together in costumes that make them memorable, their dark clothing marked by fire that seems to rise around their bodies. Cinna has designed the costumes to associate District 12 with coal and fire, turning the blackness of the mines into a glowing emblem that cannot be mistaken. As the chariot begins to move, Katniss feels fear beneath the spectacle, although her face remains composed beside Peter's. The audience responds to the sight, and that response travels through the avenues as applause, shouting, and a rising tide of attention. Haymitch's advice becomes practical now, because every gesture is collected, interpreted, and carried towards viewers who may later decide whether the tributes are worth supporting. Hot metal surrounds you as the chariot passes beneath the ceremony lights, and smoke lifts in thin strands from devices concealed within the costumes. The air tastes faintly of ash, oil, and the sharp breath of machinery working close to the skin. Flames move along the garments without consuming them, casting orange light over the horses, polished wheels, and pale faces beyond the barriers. Capitol buildings rise on both sides, their windows reflecting the fire until the street appears lined with small, trembling suns. The horses' hooves strike the stone in an even pattern, while the crowd answers with a sound that rolls between the buildings. Cinna remains somewhere behind the spectacle, trusting his design to carry its meaning. Beneath the heat and smoke, the coal-black fabric holds Katniss steady, giving her fear a visible shape that the audience can remember. When the ceremony ends, the attention does not fade, because viewers continue discussing the pair from District 12 as the tributes return to the rooms prepared for them. Katniss and Peeta have earned notice from the audience and potential sponsors, though neither can yet know what such interest may purchase inside the arena. Haymitch explains that sponsors are influenced by impressions formed before the games, and that a tribute must be seen as more than a body placed among weapons. Peeta's manner gives the Capitol a story of gentleness, while Katniss's stillness suggests something harder to name. Cinna's fire has made them legible to people who may never think about the mines. District 12 remains attached to them, yet its poverty has been turned into an image of danger, endurance, and carefully arranged brightness. Night settles against the windows, leaving reflections of electric lights suspended over the darkness. The train carriage is quiet enough for the smallest movements to become distinct, including fabric brushing leather and a cup touching a saucer. Warm blankets lie folded at the edge of the beds, and the sheets carry the clean, dry scent of linen stored away from dust. From the dining room comes the fading sweetness of baked food, mingled with the darker smell of smoke from the engine. Outside, the rails shine briefly whenever the moon appears between clouds. Katniss's costume hangs nearby, the black fabric holding faint traces of heat and ash. Peeta's clothes rest across a chair, and the soft carpet receives each careful step as the carriage rocks through the sleeping country. The tributes are housed in a training center before the games, where each district receives rooms, meals, equipment, and a carefully controlled view of the capital. You move through corridors beside Katniss and Peeta, passing doors marked with district numbers and hearing voices gathered behind them. The building contains lifts, sleeping quarters, dining areas, practice rooms, and a central hall filled with weapons. Tributes from every district train alongside one another, though the differences between them become visible almost immediately. Some have grown up hunting or working with tools, while others have received instruction because their districts have prepared them for this moment. The career tributes from Districts 1, 2, and 4 move with particular confidence, carrying themselves as though combat were a familiar language. Katniss recognizes the danger in their ease, and Peeta remains close enough to share the same shadow. The training center smells of oil, varnished wood, leather, and the faint mineral odor of metal warmed by repeated use. Echoes of weapons travel through the hall, with arrows striking targets, knives landing against boards, and swords meeting shields in brief, hard sounds. Mats cover sections of the floor, their surfaces rough beneath the soles of unfamiliar shoes. Bright electric lights hang above the practice stations, reflecting in polished blades and shallow trays of water. Nearby, someone splits kindling with an axe, sending a clean wooden crack through the larger echoes. The air is warmer than the corridors, yet a draft moves beneath the doors and brings the cool scent of stone. Every district leaves its own mark upon the hall, whether through quiet caution, careless confidence, or the measured sound of someone learning quickly. Haymitch advises Katniss to show the game makers enough skill to remain visible, but not enough to appear eager for their approval. He describes the assessment as another public stage, although the room will contain fewer spectators and far more concealed judgment. Peeta works with weights, knots, and physical exercises, revealing the strength gained from lifting flour at the bakery. Katniss moves among the stations with knowledge gathered from the woods, considering bows, knives, snares, and the distances between herself and those watching. The career tributes practice openly, competing for attention with polished movements and deliberate displays of violence. Around them, the uneven preparation of the districts becomes impossible to ignore. Some children have been shaped for the arena, while others have merely been delivered to it. The hall changes sound as different exercises begin, and the echo of weapons forms a shifting pattern above the murmur of voices. A spear strikes a padded target with a hollow thud, followed by the rapid scrape of a whetstone along a blade. Bowstrings give brief twanging notes, while leather gloves creak around unfamiliar handles. Sweat carries a faint saltiness through the warmer air, joining the smells of oil and dust beneath the overhead lights. Wooden tables hold apples, bread, and cups of water for the tributes, though the food seems ordinary beside the abundance of the train. Dust rises in small clouds when feet cross the mats, settling slowly upon dark clothing. Through the tall windows, the Capitol glows beyond the building, bright enough to make the night look artificial. Each tribute receives an individual assessment from the game makers, separating the children from their companions for a short period of concentrated scrutiny. Katniss enters the room alone, carrying the bow that has become an extension of her memory and her hands. The game makers sit above the floor at a long table, eating, drinking, and speaking among themselves with the distracted air of people accustomed to power. She waits while they overlook her, then chooses an apple placed inside the roasted pig's mouth upon their table. The arrow leaves the string cleanly and crosses the room before anyone has time to react. It strikes the apple and drives it from the pig's mouth, sending a sharp sound through the silence. Katniss lowers the bow, turns away, and leaves the game makers with the precise demonstration they had failed to request. The assessment room is cooler than the training hall, though the scent of roasted meat remains suspended beneath the lamps. Porcelain plates sit among papers, glasses, and polished utensils, making the game makers appear to be dining in a private room rather than judging frightened children. The arrow's passage creates a brief disturbance in the air, followed by the soft movement of feathers as it settles into the apple. A smear of sauce shines against the tablecloth beside the target, and one silver spoon rocks once before becoming still. Katniss's boots touch the floor with controlled steps as she leaves. Beyond the doors, the larger center continues its ordinary noise, with weapons striking wood and voices carrying along the corridors. Cool air follows her into the hall, where Peter waits among the other tributes. The score given after the individual assessments becomes another part of the public story, though Katniss does not yet know how strongly the arrow has forced the game makers to notice her. Haymitch receives the information and understands that attention can be both protection and danger. A high score may attract sponsors, but it may also mark a tribute as a threat before the arena has begun. Peter's assessment adds to the impression that District 12 contains more strength than the Capitol expected. Cinna continues working with Katniss, refining the image of fire until it becomes connected not only with Cole, but with a girl who refuses to disappear. Effie Trinket repeats the importance of presentation, while Haymitch measures every possible advantage against the cost that might follow. A shallow bowl of water catches the ceiling lights near the training center's entrance, and the reflections break whenever someone passes. The corridor walls hold a faint warmth from hidden pipes, while the floor remains cool beneath your feet. Somewhere below, a lift descends with a muffled vibration, and the sound travels through the building like distant thunder. The smell of bread comes from a service passage, joined by the sweetness of fruit and the clean sharpness of freshly washed cloth. Doors open and close along the corridor, releasing fragments of conversation before the quiet gathers again. Katniss's hands remain marked by the bowstring, and Peter carries the heavier silence of his own thoughts. The capital surrounds the tributes with comfort, yet every softness exists within a structure built to contain them. The days before the games move according to schedules printed by people who never need to ask whether the children are ready. Katniss rises beneath clean sheets, eats food prepared by unseen cooks, and returns to the training hall where every district is represented. Peter practices with weights and learns to move through close spaces, while Katniss observes the career tributes as they refine weapons they already understand. Districts 1, 2, and 4 have given their children confidence, instruction, and a willingness to treat the arena as a contest rather than a sentence. Other tributes remain cautious, protecting their abilities behind awkward movements or deliberate weakness. The training center allows the children to stand together, but the divisions between districts accompany them into every room. Above all of them, the capital waits for a performance that will be broadcast as entertainment. The training hall holds the warmth of many bodies, though the stone walls preserve a coolness from the night outside. Leather straps hang from hooks, their surfaces worn smooth where countless hands have tightened them. Metal bowls contain water, and small rings appear whenever a nearby footfall disturbs the floor. The echo of weapons continues from one end of the room to the other, changing from the ring of steel to the dull impact of padded practice. A faint smell of pine rises from the spear shafts, while bow wax and machine oil cling to the air around the equipment tables. Electric lights shine upon dust suspended above the mats, making each particle drift like a tiny, pale ember. Beyond the windows, Capitol towers hold their own lights against the darkness, refusing the quiet that surrounds District 12. As the final training sessions approach, Katniss understands that survival will depend upon what the audience believes, what the sponsors value, and what the other tributes fear. Haymitch continues to advise her on the public stages, reminding her that Cinna's story must remain visible when the costumes are gone. Peter's companionship becomes part of that story, whether through shared meals, guarded conversations, or the simple fact of standing beside her beneath the ceremony lights. Effie Trinket prepares them for interviews and appearances, preserving the language of celebration even when the arena waits nearby. Cinna adjusts small details in Katniss's clothing, keeping the coal and fire association clear without allowing it to become a disguise. The train north has ended, but its lessons remain in the polished rooms, the rich food, and the constant knowledge of being watched. In the evening, the training center grows quieter, and the last sounds from the practice hall arrive as distant impacts through the walls. The carpet softens the corridor beneath each step, while the lamps cast warm pools across doors, benches, and brass signs. Linen curtains move slightly whenever the ventilation changes, releasing a trace of soap and dry cotton. A tray of untouched pastries rests on a side table, their sweet-baked smell lingering in the stillness. Outside, rain gathers upon the Capitol windows, drawing narrow paths through the reflected lights. The glass shows towers, lamps, and the pale suggestion of moving vehicles, but no darkness deep enough to resemble the woods. Within the center, Katniss and Peter remain enclosed by comfort, preparation, and the patient machinery of the games. The journey from District 12 to the capital has carried Katniss through landscapes she could not freely visit, across distances measured by rails, stations, and changing skies. It has placed her beside Peter beneath Cinna's fire, at a table crowded with capital food, and among tributes trained in unequal worlds. Effie Trinket has taught the ceremonies, Haymitch has taught the dangers of attention, and the stylists have given District 12 an image the capital cannot easily set aside. The opening ceremony has introduced all 24 tributes, while the training center has revealed how each child may be expected to fight. Katniss's arrow has made the game makers notice her, and that notice has begun to gather around her like another form of heat. Far from the coal fields, the capital continues preparing its lights, cameras, and arena. You are standing beneath the bright studio lamps when preparation for the interviews begins, with powder resting lightly across your face and warm fabric gathered around your shoulders. The Capitol production team moves around you with quiet efficiency, adjusting the fall of your dress, smoothing your hair, and deciding how your expression should appear beneath the cameras. You hear the soft turning of camera mounts, the faint rustle of papers, and the measured applause of a controlled audience waiting beyond the curtains. A microphone is held close to your mouth, though nobody asks what you wish to say. The room smells of perfume, powder, and heated cloth, while the lights make every small movement seem deliberate. Your body remains still because stillness has become part of the performance. Somewhere nearby, 23 other tributes are being arranged into stories, each one polished for an audience that has already begun to imagine their deaths. The tribute scores have given those imagined stories their first shape. After the private training sessions, each tribute has appeared before the game makers and demonstrated whatever skill might persuade them to grant attention. Katniss receives a high score after sending an arrow through the apple in the roasted pig's mouth, because the gesture carries both accuracy and defiance. You can still feel the tension of that moment in the training center, where the game makers watched without offering any visible response. Peter receives a strong score as well, showing physical ability and composure when he lifts a heavy weight and allows it to fall with controlled force. The numbers are announced before the games, influencing public expectations. A high score makes a tribute seem dangerous, valuable, and worth watching. A lower score may make a child appear helpless, forgettable, or easy to dismiss. Katniss's 11 places her beneath a sharper light. Warm air gathers beneath the studio ceiling, carrying the sweet trace of perfume from the polished corridors. The lamps press against your skin until the powder feels almost damp, and the fabric at your neck becomes heavier with each passing minute. Beyond the curtain, the audience waits in a dim arrangement of seats, silent until a signal invites applause. Cameras rest on their mounts like dark, patient birds, their lenses angled towards the stage. The microphone beside your lips has a small metallic smell, mingled with the faint scent of varnished wood. Every surface shines beneath the lamps, including the painted backdrop, where the Capitol colors have been arranged in careful layers. You can hear shoes moving over the floor behind you, then stopping when the stage manager raises a hand. The silence never becomes complete, because electrical equipment hums softly and someone breathes near the curtains. The whole room seems to hold itself ready for your face. Caesar Flickerman hosts the televised interviews, appearing in a suit and hair color so vivid that he seems less like a man than a carefully illuminated emblem. His voice remains warm, his questions lively, and his attention fixed upon whatever part of each tribute can be made memorable. The tributes are interviewed publicly before entering the arena, and the ceremony turns private fear into entertainment. Each child crosses the stage, sits beneath the lights, and gives the Capitol a version of a self that can be applauded. Caesar knows how to make nervous answers appear charming, and he knows when to let silence deepen around a frightened face. The audience is encouraged to laugh, admire, pity, or anticipate. Katniss watches the sequence unfold and begins to understand that survival will depend upon more than arrows, food, or physical strength. Before the arena opens, she must become someone the audience is willing to keep alive. Powder lies in the shallow folds of the curtains, and the scent of perfume lingers where earlier tributes have passed. The stage floor feels smooth beneath your shoes, warmed by the lamps that hang overhead in shining rows. Applause rises and falls according to signals you cannot see, growing suddenly louder when Caesar gestures towards the audience. Cameras turn on their mounts with a faint mechanical whisper, tracking each tribute as a child walks into the open space. The microphone is carried from one chair to the next, held close enough to catch every tremor and pause. Behind the brilliant stage, darker passages lead towards dressing rooms where costumes hang unused. In those rooms, fear waits beside mirrors and bowls of powder. In front of the audience, fear is given a costume, a name, and a pleasing arrangement of words. The warmth on your face cannot soften the cold knowledge that every expression may become part of someone's evening entertainment. Peter speaks first through the language of affection and performance. When Caesar asks whether there is someone special waiting for him at home, Peter declares that he has loved Katniss for a long time. The words move across the stage with a calmness that makes them seem prepared, although Katniss has not heard them before. She is surprised by Peter's public declaration, and for one suspended moment, her expression escapes the management of the Capitol production team. Caesar catches the surprise, the audience catches Caesar's delight, and the cameras catch everything. Peter does not retreat from the story. He allows affection to become visible, shaping his baker's background into part of a carefully formed public identity. He is the gentle son of a baker, a young man, carrying an old love into a cruel contest. The declaration gives the audience a romantic story to follow, and the story begins surrounding both tributes before either has learned how to control it. The studio grows louder around the shape of Peter's confession, though the lights remain steady and white. Applause rolls across the audience like a soft disturbance through grass, then gathers strength as Caesar leans towards him. Perfume rises from the front rows, mixed with warm fabric, polished seats, and the faint sweetness of sugared drinks. Peter's microphone reflects the lamps whenever he turns his head, catching a narrow line of silver beside his mouth. Cameras pivot slowly, recording his face from several angles, while another lens settles upon Katniss's unexpected stillness. You feel the heat gather behind your ears, and you hear the audience respond to tenderness as though tenderness were a rare luxury. The stage has no wind, no natural darkness, and no uncertain sound. Every reaction is enclosed within the controlled room, where affection can be enlarged until it seems almost as powerful as fear. Katniss initially treats the story as a strategy for attracting sponsors. She understands that sponsors may send useful supplies to tributes during the games, including medicine, food, tools, and other objects that can mean the difference between waking and dying. A tribute who is admired may receive help when the cameras show injury or exhaustion. A tribute who is forgotten may be left alone beneath the arena's changing sky. Peter's declaration, therefore, becomes something Katniss can examine as a practical advantage, even while its emotional force unsettles her. She tries to understand whether his story is tactical, sincere, or both. The uncertainty troubles her, because the interview has made private feelings public before she can decide what they mean. She knows that Peter has helped her in the past, but she does not know whether kindness can survive beneath a performance designed for millions of watching eyes. The dressing room offers little relief from the brightness, because bulbs surround each mirror and leave no corner entirely dark. Powder rests on the table in open containers, its pale surface broken by brushes and fingertips. Warm cloth hangs from hooks along the wall, giving off the dry smell of pressed fibers and perfume. Somewhere beyond the closed door, the audience continues its conversation in a low, shifting murmur. The cameras remain outside, but their presence seems to enter through the walls, carried by the expectation that every face may soon be shown again. You sit beneath the mirror lights while a stylist adjusts a strand of hair that has already been arranged twice. The room contains no rain, soil, coal dust, or woodland air. It contains only light, fabric, cosmetics, and the careful sounds of people preparing a human being for public use. Haymitch encourages Katniss to cooperate with the public image. He explains that sponsors watch the tributes as characters, not merely as fighters, and characters need motives that can be remembered after the program ends. A love story can make hunger appear tragic, danger appear intimate, and an injury appear worthy of intervention. Haymitch tells Katniss that Peter has given the capital something it already understands, something tender enough to invite sympathy and simple enough to repeat. She does not need to feel precisely what the audience believes she feels. She needs to allow the audience to believe that feeling exists. His advice is practical, yet it forces Katniss to consider the strange authority now held by strangers who have never touched her life. The public image is not only a costume. It is a system of expectations that may send medicine into the arena or leave her without assistance. At the edge of the stage, your shadow falls beneath the lamps and disappears into the darker floor. The heat from the fixtures has dried the powder at your temples, leaving a fine, smooth tightness across the skin. Caesar's voice carries easily through the room, rich with amusement and sympathy, while the audience answers in waves of approval. Microphones pass from hand to hand, and each metal grill briefly catches the perfume of the person speaking. The cameras turn with careful patience, never rushing, never losing their subject. Applause can sound gentle when it is controlled, but underneath its softness lies an instruction about what the audience wishes to feel. The air does not move naturally across the stage. It is warmed and circulated by hidden machines, carrying every manufactured scent towards the seats. You remain inside that brightness, while the capital decides which parts of you deserve to become visible. The interview stage turns private fear into entertainment because the audience cannot be shown fear without giving it an attractive shape. Katniss's uncertainty becomes an expression that Caesar can interpret, while Peter's confession becomes a tender complication in the approaching violence. The game makers control the arena and can alter its conditions, but the audience begins exerting another kind of control before the games have started. Their attention settles upon Katniss and Peter as a pair, and their expectations gather around the imagined possibility of shared devotion. The arena may contain fire, thirst, mutations, storms, or sudden changes in terrain. The public story can contain jealousy, sacrifice, longing, and reunion. Both forms of control are designed by others. Katniss has prepared to fight bodies in a landscape, yet the interviews reveal that she must also move through the invisible landscape of public feeling. The curtains close while applause continues beyond them, softened into a broad, indistinct pressure. Warm fabric brushes your arm as attendants pass with clipboards and folded costumes. Powder has settled into the seams of the chairs, and perfume clings to the air even after the speakers leave the stage. The studio lamps remain bright on the other side, turning the curtain into a thin, glowing surface. Cameras are moved along their tracks, their wheels making muted sounds against the polished floor. Someone speaks close to your shoulder, but the words are difficult to separate from the machinery and distant applause. In the waiting space, darkness gathers only at ankle level, beneath tables and behind equipment. The rest of the room stays visible, carefully lit, as though the capital fears what might be revealed in an unobserved corner. Katniss's appearance and speech are managed by the capital production team, who understand that a public image begins before the first answer is spoken. Her clothes must suggest a particular kind of beauty, her posture must communicate strength without seeming threatening, and her words must remain clear beneath Caesar's questions. The stylists have already made District 12 appear memorable, but the interview requires a more intimate arrangement. Katniss must seem capable enough to interest the audience and vulnerable enough to invite protection. Her speech must carry the plainness of home while fitting the polished language expected by the capital. Every choice becomes part of the image, including pauses, glances, and the manner in which she turns towards Peter. She begins to feel her own face as a public object, separated from the private person who once moved through the woods with a bow. A faint warmth remains in the fabric around your shoulders, though the corridor outside the studio is cooler. Powder has fallen in pale marks upon the floor, where footsteps disturb it and leave the marks uneven. The scent of perfume follows the moving attendants, fading briefly whenever a door opens towards a plainer passage. From far away, the audience releases another burst of applause, perhaps for a tribute whose answer has pleased them. The sound travels through the building without revealing its source. You pass beneath several wall lamps, each one bright enough to show every thread in the carpet. Behind the doors, costumes wait on racks, and mirrors hold faces that have been painted into expressions of courage. The cameras continue their work elsewhere, turning on their mounts whenever another tribute enters the light. Nothing in the building seems willing to sleep. Peter Baker's background contributes to his carefully shaped public identity. He is presented as someone raised among loaves, ovens, flour, and the familiar labor of feeding a neighborhood. The capital can understand that image because it transforms ordinary work into a gentle symbol of warmth. Peter's strength does not disappear, but it is placed beside the memory of bread, making him appear both capable and kind. When he speaks of Katniss, the declaration seems connected to that identity, as though affection has been kept alive like a loaf protected from the cold. Katniss recognizes the usefulness of the story, yet she cannot reduce it entirely to strategy. Peter knows how to make words seem effortless, and he knows how to keep his composure when the audience searches his face. His performance is careful because it has to survive questioning, suspicion, and the watchful judgment of the capital. The smell of baked grain is absent from the studio, replaced by powder, perfume, and the heated odor of lamps. Still, Peter's costume carries the suggestion of a warmer place, with thick cloth and colors chosen to soften his outline. The microphone rests near his mouth, catching the low movement of his voice. Audience members lean forward beneath the stage lights, their faces painted and brightened for the pleasure of being seen. Applause breaks over the room at measured moments, rising when Caesar offers an approving gesture. Behind Peter, cameras turn smoothly, following the smallest shift in his shoulders. You can hear the faint friction of his sleeve when he moves his hands. The studio has made bread into an idea, affection into a spectacle, and composure into a sign of goodness. Around you, every ordinary detail has been prepared to carry a meaning. Katniss begins to wonder whether Peter's feelings are sincere because his confession does not resemble a simple deception. He does not appear hurried, and he does not glance towards her for permission before speaking. His words seem to belong to him even as they become useful to her. The possibility that affection and strategy can exist together leaves Katniss without a clear answer. She understands that Peter may be protecting himself, helping her, or shaping the audience's response to both of them. She also understands that a public declaration cannot be withdrawn once millions have heard it. The story has entered the capital's imagination, where it can be repeated by commentators, remembered by sponsors, and carried into the arena as an expectation. Peter speaks through affection and performance, and Katniss must decide how to stand beside that combination without being swallowed by it. The passage beyond the interview rooms is cooler, with stone beneath your feet and only a few wall lamps burning. The warmth of the stage follows you for several steps, trapped in your sleeves and hair. Powder gathers at the collar, while perfume remains faintly present beneath the sharper smell of metal doors. A camera operator rolls equipment past without speaking, the wheels turning in a steady rhythm. From the studio, applause becomes a distant vibration, then fades into the ordinary sounds of the building. You pass closed rooms where tributes sit with attendants, their voices lowered and their hands resting in their laps. No one opens a window. No natural breeze reaches these corridors. The air remains still and carefully measured, like the space inside a locked bedroom before dawn, when darkness has not yet lifted and every small sound appears important. Haymitch's instruction becomes clearer when he describes the public as a collection of possible allies. Sponsors may send useful supplies to tributes during the games, but they send those supplies through feeling. A sponsor must care enough to spend money, and care requires a reason that can be repeated. Katniss's high score after her archery demonstration gives her danger and skill, while Peter's strong score gives him strength and control. The romance adds another layer, allowing viewers to imagine that each is fighting not only to survive, but also to preserve someone else. Haymitch encourages Katniss to cooperate with that image, because the arena will be shaped by what the audience expects. If the public sees two lovers, a moment of separation may become painful, and pain may become valuable. In the games, sympathy can take the form of a small silver parachute lowering through smoke. The room where Haymitch speaks contains dim lamps and the stale scent of old drink, but even there the capital's brightness seems to linger. Warm fabric lies across a chair, folded by someone who expects another appearance soon. The walls absorb most sounds, leaving only the quiet movement of glass and clothing. Through a nearby door, you hear technicians testing equipment, their voices reduced to murmurs beneath the machinery. Powder remains on Katniss's skin, softening the harshness of her features without removing the strain from her eyes. The night outside cannot be seen, though the building has windows somewhere beyond the corridors. You imagine cold air over the districts, dark roofs beneath ordinary stars, and the stillness of a locked bedroom before dawn. Here, every silence belongs to preparation, and every pause waits for a camera to begin turning. Katniss accepts that the public image may be useful, although she does not surrender her private judgment to it. She begins to answer in ways that leave space for the audience's romantic interpretation. Peter's declaration can be allowed to stand without immediate denial, and her surprise can become evidence of a complicated past. Caesar receives the story gladly, guiding the conversation so that affection remains at its center. The televised romance begins to surround them before either can control it. It follows Katniss through the corridors, into the training center, and towards the rooms where the tributes wait for the final morning. Even the high score from the archery demonstration is absorbed into the story, becoming the skill of a fierce girl who must protect the boy she loves. The image does not replace the danger of the games. It gives the danger a shape the audience can watch. Night rests against the Capitol windows, though the interview building remains bright enough to make the darkness seem distant. The lamps in the corridors cast pale reflections upon the polished floor, and your footsteps appear beside you as blurred shadows. Perfume has faded from the air, leaving the softer smells of fabric, cosmetics, and warm electrical equipment. Somewhere below, machinery continues to turn, preparing broadcasts that will be repeated through the night. The audience has gone, yet its applause remains in memory as a physical pressure around the ears. Cameras stand idle on their mounts, lenses covered, their earlier movement replaced by stillness. A microphone lies on a table with its cord coiled neatly beside it. The empty stage looks smaller without voices, but the painted backdrop continues to suggest a world in which every feeling can be displayed. On the eve of the games, the public story is already part of Katniss and Peter's survival. The arena remains ahead of them, controlled by game makers who can alter its conditions whenever the spectacle requires it. They may change the weather, close a route, release danger, or place resources where desperate children will be forced to compete. The tribute scores have prepared the audience to expect particular kinds of strength, while the interviews have given those expectations emotional meaning. Katniss is no longer only the girl with the bow from District 12. She is also the girl in the love story, the tribute whose skill is wrapped in tenderness and whose future can be discussed before she reaches the arena. Peter is no longer only the baker's son. He is the strong, composed boy whose affection has become a public promise. In the last hours before sleep, the building settles into a quieter rhythm. Warm fabric hangs untouched in the dressing rooms, retaining a faint trace of perfume beneath the lamps. Powder brushes rest in shallow dishes, their handles angled towards the mirrors. The cameras have stopped turning, but small indicator lights remain awake on their dark bodies. Beyond the sealed windows, the air is cold, and the city is full of distant illumination. Inside, doors close softly, footsteps diminish, and the applause of the controlled audience survives only as a fading echo in the walls. A microphone waits on its stand, close to the place where mouths have offered fear, affection, and carefully measured hope. The stillness of a locked bedroom before dawn settles over the rooms, though the capital has not yet allowed darkness to become complete. Katniss lies awake, with the public story moving through her thoughts. She considers Peter's words, the look on Caesar Flickerman's face, and the way the audience leaned towards the promise of love. She considers Haymitch's advice about sponsors, knowing that food, medicine, or a useful tool may arrive only if the story remains convincing. She remembers the training center, the game makers, and the arrow that earned her a high score. Peter's strong score has made him a serious opponent, yet his composure has also made him someone the audience may wish to preserve. Their images have begun to depend upon one another. The story is tactical because it may attract gifts. It is sincere because Peter has placed something personal before the public. It is dangerous because neither meaning can be separated cleanly from the other. A faint line of light rests beneath the bedroom door, and the room itself remains quiet enough to reveal the smallest movements. Fabric brushes against the bed when you turn, making a dry sound that disappears almost at once. Powder still clings to the skin, while perfume has softened into a trace too slight to identify. Outside, distant machinery hums behind the walls, and somewhere a lift moves through the building with a muted mechanical sigh. The air is warm but not comforting, held in place by the sealed rooms and narrow windows. Beyond the capital, colder places are preparing for morning, with dark streets, coal dust, and ordinary beds. Here, the locked bedroom remains suspended between public brightness and private fear. Nothing moves quickly, because dawn has not yet opened the doors. Peter's story has traveled farther than his voice, carried by broadcasts and repeated in homes across Panem. In District 12, people who know Katniss may hear her name beside his and imagine what the capital has arranged for them. Elsewhere, strangers may picture two young people bound together by affection beneath the threat of the arena. The story gives the audience a reason to hope, and hope makes the coming violence easier to watch. Katniss understands that this is part of the capital's power. It does not merely display suffering. It places suffering inside a narrative that can be admired, discussed, and consumed. The interview stage has turned private fear into entertainment, while the arena will turn entertainment into a test of endurance. Between those two spaces, Katniss and Peter carry an image neither of them fully owns. The last lamps in the preparation rooms are lowered, leaving the mirrors dark and the powder pale upon their surfaces. Warm fabric rests in quiet rows, waiting for bodies that have already been sent back to their rooms. The smell of perfume remains caught in curtains and collars, mingling with the dry scent of cosmetics. Cameras stand beneath their covers, fixed and silent after hours of turning on their mounts. The applause has ended, though the empty studio seems to remember its shape. A microphone has been placed in a case, its metal grill hidden from the light. Through the walls, the capital continues to breathe with distant pipes, lifts, and guarded footsteps. You stand in the softened darkness and feel how quickly brightness can become memory. Morning is approaching without haste, bringing the arena closer with every quiet minute. Katniss knows that the public image cannot protect her from every danger. The game makers control the arena, and their decisions can make a careful plan useless. A stream may dry, a forest may burn, a path may close, or the sky may change without warning. The high score from her archery demonstration will make others watch her closely, just as Peter's physical ability and composure will mark him as a serious threat. Yet the romance may alter the way those watchers respond when either tribute is wounded. Sponsors may send useful supplies, and the gifts may arrive because affection has become visible. Haymitch's guidance has taught Katniss to treat attention as a resource, even while she distrusts the people who control it. In the arena, survival will depend upon what she can shoot, carry, find, and endure. It will also depend upon what the audience believes. The locked room before dawn becomes a place of small, separate sounds. Cloth shifts beneath your fingers, a pipe clicks somewhere behind the wall, and the ventilation system carries a thin current through the darkness. The air holds the faint warmth of the building, softened by the absence of lamps and voices. A trace of perfume remains near the collar, while powder settles invisibly upon the pillow. No cameras turn here, yet the possibility of being watched has not vanished. The Capitol has arranged the rooms, the costumes, the interviews, and the expectations that now fill them. Beyond the door, attendants wait for the signal to begin another day. Within the room, darkness gathers patiently, covering the painted face and the carefully chosen clothes. For a little while, the public story has no voice. When morning arrives, Katniss will carry the story into the arena. She will carry Peter's declaration, Haymitch's instructions, her high score, and the image shaped by the stylists and production team. Peter will carry his baker's identity, his strong score, and the composure that made his interview believable. Around them, the Capitol will carry its cameras, controlled applause, and appetite for a narrative that can continue after the first deaths. The arena will wait beneath the game maker's authority, ready for conditions to shift according to design. The public story is already part of their survival, woven through fear like a bright thread. Katniss does not yet know whether Peter's love is tactical, sincere, or both. She knows only that the audience has begun to believe it. Dawn approaches behind the sealed windows, bringing a gradual paling to the edges of the room. The final darkness remains in the corners, beneath the bed, and along the line of the closed door. Warm cloth has cooled against the chair, while the perfume in the air has become almost indistinguishable from the scent of wood and fabric. The building makes quiet preparations below, with distant wheels, muted footsteps, and the low movement of hidden machinery. No applause rises now, and no camera turns towards the waiting faces. The microphone rests in its case, far from the mouth that gave the story its first shape. You remain within the stillness before the doors open, holding the silence close while the Capitol readies its spectacle. The morning will bring brightness again, and with it, the arena, the watchers, and the story already taking shape. The metallic ring of the starting gong cuts through the morning, and the ordinary world falls away beneath its single, hard note. You stand upon a circular metal plate, with 24 tributes placed at equal distances around the cornucopia. The great golden vessel rises at the center, its curved mouth facing the pale sky, and within it lie weapons, equipment, food, and supplies arranged for hurried hands. For one suspended instant, nobody moves. The air holds the scent of damp grass, pine resin, and distant machinery, while the forest waits beyond the open ground. Then the stillness breaks, and every tribute must decide whether the first rule of the arena is courage, speed, or simple survival. The starting platform is cold beneath your feet, though the sun has already begun to warm the upper branches. Dew clings to the grass in small beads, shining beside fragments of gravel and darkened soil. Around you, the cornucopia casts a broad shadow over packs, blades, metal containers, and bundles wrapped in canvas. The curved bronze surface smells faintly of oil, dust, and heated metal. Insects hum somewhere beyond the boundary of the clearing, hidden among the pines. A breeze passes over the open field, carrying the green bitterness of crushed leaves and the resinous sweetness of bark split by summer heat. The forest seems close enough to touch, yet the space between the plates and the trees feels exposed, measured, and deliberate. Katniss remembers Haymitch's instruction, given with the bluntness of a man who has survived by refusing to romanticize danger. She is to flee rather than fight immediately, because the cornucopia will become the center of the first bloodshed. Distance, water, and observation offer better chances than a weapon seized beneath the eyes of 23 frightened opponents. When the gong sounds, she turns away from the golden vessel. Her feet carry her across the open ground while other tributes rush inward, and the first cries rise behind her. Katniss reaches a backpack during the opening scramble, pulling it free before continuing towards the trees. The pack contains survival equipment, and its weight settles against her shoulders like a small promise of time. Your running begins beneath the sound of pursuit, though no single pair of footsteps remains distinct for long. Wet earth gives way under your boots, and shallow roots catch at your stride as the forest receives you. Pine needles cover the ground in soft brown layers, hiding stones, cones, and the occasional sharp branch. The air is cooler beneath the canopy, with resin gathering in the bark and crushed leaves releasing a green, peppery scent. Behind you, the clearing remains visible in brief flashes between trunks, bright as a sheet of hammered metal. Insects hum above your head, their vibration mingling with the faint clatter of weapons from the cornucopia. Every tree offers cover, yet every thicket may conceal another tribute, and the forest becomes both shelter and a set of invisible boundaries. The initial bloodshed takes place around the cornucopia, exactly as Haymitch predicted. Tributes reach for knives, bows, packs, and water containers, colliding in the narrow space beneath the vessel's shadow. The spectacle begins with bodies moving too quickly for thought, survival reduced to the distance between one hand and another. Katniss does not see every death, but she understands what the scattered sounds mean. She keeps moving, carrying the backpack and the equipment gathered during the scramble. Her choice is not peaceful, because the arena permits no peaceful choice for long. It is a decision to postpone confrontation until she understands the ground, the supplies, the other tributes, and the dangers hidden beyond the first bright circle. A narrow stream eventually appears between the trees, its surface broken by small stones and trembling reflections. You kneel beside it, lowering your hands into water cold enough to ache through your fingers. The current carries pine needles, pale grains of sand, and tiny fragments of leaves towards a darker bend. Nearby, the soil is black and wet, pressed into shallow hollows by animals or earlier footsteps. The sound of running water softens the distant noises of the clearing, though the silence between each bird call remains watchful. You drink carefully, tasting minerals, mud, and the faint bitterness of vegetation. Water becomes more valuable than any blade, because it gives the body permission to continue while the arena waits for thirst to weaken its occupants. Katniss follows the stream through the forest, using it to replenish her strength and establish a route away from the cornucopia. She learns that survival depends upon small observations rather than grand gestures. The arena contains forest, streams, caves, and open areas, each landscape offering protection while exposing a different weakness. The trees provide concealment but limit vision. The streams provide water but create predictable paths. Caves offer darkness and shelter, while open areas allow movement but leave tributes visible to the cameras. Katniss begins to read these places as carefully as she reads tracks in the soil. Her distance from the others is temporary, and she knows that the game makers have designed the terrain to draw the tributes together again. The canopy thickens as the day advances, turning sunlight into pale green fragments. You pass beneath branches knitted closely overhead, where droplets remain from the night and fall with soft taps upon your shoulders. Pine resin glistens along a broken limb, amber and sticky beneath the warmth. Crushed leaves cling to your soles, carrying their damp, earthy fragrance into the air. Somewhere above, an insect drones steadily, then fades as another takes its place. The forest floor changes by degrees, from sponge-soft moss to exposed stone and tangled roots. In the dimness, distance becomes uncertain. A tree 20 paces away may seem close, while a clearing beyond it can remain hidden until you are standing at its edge. The game makers use engineered dangers to direct the tribute's movements, shaping the arena as a shepherd shapes a flock. Fire, altered weather, manufactured creatures, and carefully timed threats can close one route and make another appear safe. The apparent wilderness is therefore also a mechanism, with streams, caves, forest corridors, and open ground arranged for dramatic pressure. Katniss discovers that the arena's resources are controlled as part of the spectacle. Water may be plentiful or scarce according to the needs of the story, and supplies may be placed where desperation will overcome caution. Even the landscape participates in the contest. The rules are not written on a page, but they exist in every boundary, every camera, every ration, and every danger waiting beyond the visible path. The open areas hold a different kind of heat because sunlight settles upon the grass without interruption. You step from shadow into brightness and feel warmth spread across your face, neck, and hands. Tall stems brush against your clothing, leaving faint traces of pollen and dry green scent. The soil here is firmer, though patches of mud remain beneath low plants near the stream. Insects gather above the grass, humming in wavering patterns that rise and fall like distant wires. Beyond the clearing, the pines stand in close ranks, their trunks marked with reddish bark and silver scratches. A cave mouth may appear beneath a bank of roots, while a broad meadow may conceal a line of watchers. The arena's openness is never simple openness, and shelter always carries its own cost. Peter's apparent alliance with the courier tributes complicates Katniss's understanding of him. She sees him moving among those trained to kill, sharing their direction, and remaining close to the tributes who have treated the games as a contest of strength. The image is difficult to reconcile with the boy who once offered her bread, or with the quiet kindness that survived in the bakery's shadow. Peter joins the courier tributes for part of the games, and his presence gives their group an unexpected advantage. When he tells them that he knows where Katniss is likely to hide, the words become another danger inside the forest. His knowledge of her habits can turn familiar shelter into a marked location. At dusk, the trees hold the day's heat in their trunks, and the air grows thick with the scent of needles warmed by the sun. You move beneath branches that scrape lightly against one another, producing a dry whisper above the lower hush. The stream beside you has darkened from silver to brown, although each shallow stone still carries a narrow rim of reflected light. A moth settles on a leaf, its wings opening and closing without haste. Somewhere farther away, a branch breaks, followed by a long interval in which nothing answers. The ground is cool where shade has gathered, but the exposed roots retain a faint warmth against your palms. Even the quiet seems arranged, as though the arena has learned how to hold its breath. Katniss considers Peter's words as she chooses new hiding places, examining the shelter beneath branches and the shadows beside rocks. His statement may be a genuine betrayal, an attempt to gain the courier's trust, or a warning disguised as information. The uncertainty protects him from being understood too quickly, but it also keeps Katniss from relying upon him. The arena has made every relationship conditional. Friendship can become strategy, affection can become bait, and memory can be used as a weapon by those controlling the spectacle. Katniss continues through the forest, searching for water and observing the paths that the game makers appear to favor. She understands that remaining unseen is not enough. She must also learn why certain places are made visible. Night settles over the open areas first, leaving the tree trunks as tall black shapes against a fading sky. You find a place where the ground rises above the stream, and the dampness of the soil cools the air around your knees. The smell of blood from the cornucopia no longer reaches this far, yet the memory of it remains sharp, metallic, and heavy. Leaves stir in small groups beneath the movement of unseen creatures. Insects continue their humming, now closer to the ground, while a larger night sound calls once from somewhere beyond the bank. The backpack rests against your side, its fabric rough beneath your fingers. Each object within it has become familiar through touch, and each item carries the quiet burden of another hour. Morning brings Katniss towards a new part of the arena, where the forest opens around clusters of rock and shallow caves. She examines the entrances before approaching, noticing how wind, tracks, and fallen needles reveal whether the spaces have been disturbed. A cave can conceal a tribute from the careers, but it can also become a trap if the game makers close the surrounding routes. Katniss keeps moving, conserving her strength and searching for water whenever the terrain allows. Distance remains her first protection. She chooses observation over immediate confrontation, studying the other tributes from afar and allowing their habits to reveal their weaknesses. The arena rewards those who understand patterns, even when the patterns have been designed by others. Inside the caves, the air feels older than the trees outside, carrying damp stone, mineral dust, and the faint sourness of enclosed earth. You place one hand against a wall chilled by underground water, finding ridges where the rock has fractured and softened. A thin trickle passes through a groove near the floor, making a sound like a thread drawn across glass. The ceiling disappears into darkness, though occasional drops fall from unseen hollows. Outside, heat gathers over the open ground, while the cave maintains a cool, steady breath. Leaves have blown into the entrance, their edges curled and dry. The contrast between sunlight and stone makes the arena seem divided into separate worlds, though every world remains under the same unseen attention. The forest eventually leads Katniss towards Rue, the 12-year-old tribute from District 11. Rue's size makes her easy to underestimate, yet her movements through the trees reveal knowledge shaped by orchards, fields, and careful attention. She does not approach with the loud confidence of the careers. Instead, she appears within the branches and speaks with measured caution, allowing both tributes to remain alive. Rue knows the plants, the paths, and the habits of insects. She helps Katniss identify tracker-jacker nests, warning her about the danger suspended above the ground. Their partnership grows gently, almost invisibly, within a violent system that expects every meeting to end in fear or blood. The branches above Rue's hiding places are crowded with leaves of different textures, from waxy surfaces that catch the sun to thin blades that tremble with each passing breeze. You smell pine resin where the bark has been scratched, and the sharp green fragrance mingles with crushed leaves underfoot. Bees and other insects hum in the canopy, moving between blossoms and hidden nests. The sound is soft when heard from a distance, yet it becomes more concentrated beneath a particular tree. Here, the air seems to vibrate around a dark swelling in the branches. The nest is difficult to distinguish from shadow, its surface mottled with papery layers and the slow movement of living bodies. Rue's knowledge turns an ordinary sound into a warning. Katniss and Rue begin to divide the arena between them, not by ownership, but by understanding. Rue recognizes plants that provide food, and Katniss understands the movement of the careers and the positions of their supplies. Together, they notice a pattern in the open ground where the careers have gathered equipment and provisions. The supply pile represents more than food. It gives the stronger tributes control over the contest, allowing them to remain together while others are forced to search for water or shelter. Katniss sees that the pile can be attacked without meeting the careers directly. Intelligence, patience, and a carefully chosen danger may briefly outweigh force. The plan forms slowly, beneath the sound of insects and leaves. Heat rises from the clearing where the careers have placed their supplies, making the air shimmer above metal containers and tightly bound packs. You observe the arrangement from the forest edge, where the shadows conceal your hands and face. The grass is dry in patches, though darker earth remains near the roots of the surrounding trees. A faint smell of food drifts across the open space, mingling with leather, oil, dust, and sun-warmed canvas. The couriers move with the ease of people who believe their strength has already settled the question. Beyond them, the tracker-jacker nest hangs above the ground, hidden among branches that sway whenever the wind moves through the clearing. Rue's warning remains clear in your mind, as precise as the distant hum. Katniss destroys the courier's supply pile by dropping a tracker-jacker nest onto it. The act requires her to approach the edge of the clearing, disturb the nest, and make the danger fall where the couriers cannot immediately escape. The plan depends upon timing rather than force. When the nest breaks open above the supplies, the tracker-jackers descend in a furious cloud. Their venom turns the courier's confidence into panic, and the carefully gathered resources are abandoned amid noise and confusion. Katniss reaches the pile and causes further destruction before retreating into the trees. The supplies have been controlled as part of the spectacle, but for a brief interval, control passes to someone who understands the arena's hidden connections. The insects rise like a dark veil, their bodies flashing amber and black in the hard afternoon light. You hear the sound before you feel the first sting, a dense vibration that gathers above the grass and presses against your ears. Heat spreads across the skin where the venom enters, followed by swelling that tightens the flesh. The air smells of disturbed earth, crushed stems, and something bitter released from the broken nest. Branches strike your shoulders as you run, while leaves blur at the edges of your vision. The forest seems to bend and lengthen, with trunks appearing nearer than they are and bright patches of sky floating where no opening exists. Pain becomes a pulse beneath the skin, and direction becomes uncertain. The tracker-jackers cause hallucinations and severe physical distress, making the danger more than a simple swarm. Katniss feels the venom move through her body as heat, swelling, fear, and disorientation. Images from memory rise without order, and the boundary between the arena and the past begins to loosen. The couriers suffer the same attack, their strength rendered useless by a threat too small to face directly. Katniss reaches for an arrow, a pack, and the idea of escape, but each decision requires her to distinguish reality from what the venom shows her. Her body becomes an unreliable instrument. She must trust the practical knowledge shared by Rue and the familiar direction of the trees. Your skin burns where the insects have reached you, and each swelling seems to possess its own rhythm. The forest floor shifts beneath your feet, alternately soft as moss and hard as fired clay. Pine resin clings to your fingertips when you catch yourself against a trunk, its sticky sweetness strangely vivid against the metallic taste of fear. Insects continue to hum beyond the immediate cloud, though some sounds may belong only to the hallucinations. Light fragments through the branches in white flashes, then gathers into green pools that seem to move. Your breathing becomes uneven, and the air feels too hot despite the shade. Water remains somewhere ahead, a remembered coolness rather than a visible destination. Katniss survives the attack because distance has prepared her, and because Rue's knowledge gives her a chance to recognize the nests before they become invisible threats. The destruction of the supply pile changes the balance of the games, though it does not end the danger. The couriers have lost food, equipment, and the confidence that came from possessing the center of the arena. Katniss has gained no permanent safety, only a short interval in which their power is reduced. She returns towards the forest and water, carrying the consequences of the plan in her swollen skin and unsettled mind. Rue remains close, and their partnership becomes one of the few forms of trust the arena has not entirely corrupted. A stream appears through the wavering trees, first as a cool sound, and then as a narrow line of brightness. You lower yourself beside it, feeling the wet earth receive your knees. Cold water touches your hands, carrying away dust, sweat, and small flecks of leaf. The surface reflects branches that seem to sway even when the real canopy is still. Pine resin, mud, and crushed leaves gather together in the air, while insects hum at a safer distance. Your face feels swollen, and the skin around each sting pulses beneath the water. The stream does not cure the venom, but its coolness gives the body a simple fact to hold. Water is here, the ground is solid, and the next breath can still be taken. The rules of the arena now appear to Katniss as a series of pressures rather than spoken commands. The cornucopia offers abundance and bloodshed. The forest gives shelter and concealment. Streams promise life while revealing movement. Caves offer refuge but can become enclosed traps. Open areas expose the body and create opportunities for those who are watching. The game makers alter these relationships whenever the spectacle requires a new direction. Katniss learns that the arena is not merely a place where the games happen. It is an active participant, guiding tributes towards encounters and forcing hidden resources into view. Her survival depends upon recognizing the design without allowing it to dictate every choice. Evening returns with a slow cooling of the land, and the open areas lose their harsh brightness. You rest beneath a low branch while the air gathers the scent of damp bark and cooling grass. The swelling from the tracker jackers remains painful, but the worst disorientation has begun to recede. A bird calls from beyond the stream, answered by another voice farther away. Water moves over stones with a persistent, quiet rhythm. The forest holds the marks of many passages, broken stems, disturbed soil, and leaves pressed into temporary shapes. Somewhere beyond the trees, the cornucopia waits beneath its golden curve. Its weapons and supplies have lost some of their authority, though the structure still represents the center chosen by the game makers. Peter's alliance remains unresolved in Katniss's thoughts, because the arena offers no simple way to separate performance from betrayal. He has told the careers where she is likely to hide, yet his earlier actions resist the picture of a willing enemy. Perhaps he is buying time, perhaps protecting himself, or perhaps the games have altered him more deeply than she wants to believe. Katniss cannot solve the question while the careers still move through the forest. She can only observe, remember, and preserve the possibility that another meaning exists beneath the visible one. Rue's presence offers a quieter certainty. Their agreement is not founded upon victory, but upon shared knowledge and the decision to keep one another alive. Moonlight reaches the stream in broken silver strips, lying between shadows cast by reeds and stones. You hear water touching the bank, then slipping away beneath roots that have grown into the current. The night air carries a faint chill against your face, easing the heat left in your skin. Leaves overlap above you, creating a dark ceiling through which stars appear only briefly. The scent of pine is deeper now, less sweet than in the sun, with damp earth rising from the banks. A small creature moves through the undergrowth and stops. For a moment, the whole forest seems to wait beside you, listening to the current and to the distant mechanisms hidden beyond the trees. By the end of this stage of the games, Katniss understands that survival is a form of reading. She reads water by sound, shelter by shadow, danger by insect hum, and intention by the movements of other tributes. Rue reads the forest through plants, branches, and nests, while Peter reads Katniss through the habits formed before the arena began. The careers read the spectacle through strength and possession, assuming that control of the resources guarantees control of the future. Their mistake allows a nest to become a weapon and a supply pile to become a weakness. Katniss has not mastered the arena, but she has begun to learn its grammar. The rules are cruel, shifting, and written into every living thing around her. Before sleep comes, the forest settles into layers of sound. Water continues its patient course, Insects hum intermittently among the trees, and leaves stir whenever the night wind reaches them. You feel the roughness of bark beneath one hand and the damp softness of earth beneath the other. The sharp smell of blood has faded from the clearing, though memory keeps it close, metallic, and unmistakable. Heat remains in the swollen skin, gradually loosening as the body grows still. Beyond the stream are caves, open areas, and paths shaped by unseen decisions. Beyond those lie the cornucopia, the careers, Peter, and the machinery of the spectacle. Yet for this small interval, the forest surrounds you, and the water moves steadily through the dark. You are standing beneath the trees with Katniss and Rue, where the arena has grown quiet after the violence near the stream. Rue is small beside her, quick-footed and watchful, carrying the cautious trust of someone who has survived by noticing every movement. For a little while, the two girls form a temporary alliance, joined by hunger, danger, and an understanding that neither can safely endure alone. Rue knows the paths between the branches, while Katniss understands the weapons and habits of the careers. Their arrangement is practical, yet something gentler begins to gather within it, as though companionship has entered the arena without permission. The forest holds a mild afternoon warmth beneath its upper leaves, though the ground remains damp from earlier rain. Ferns bow over shallow hollows, and pale insects drift between stems where sunlight falls in broken pieces. A clear bird call rises above the trees, delicate and distant, then fades into the layered rustle of branches. You feel the rough bark of a trunk beneath your palm, ridged with age and darkened by moisture. Nearby, wildflowers bend around stones and fallen twigs, their small faces turned towards the brightness. The air smells of crushed grass, wet leaves, and faint smoke carried from somewhere beyond the visible woodland. Nothing in the clearing appears hurried, although every living thing seems to be listening. Rue notices the mockingjay pin on Katniss's clothing, and the small image becomes more than a decoration between them. She recognizes the bird as a meaningful symbol, connected with song and memory, because a mockingjay can receive a melody and return it altered but recognizable. In Rue's world, such birds are not merely part of the forest's background. They are reminders that voices may travel farther than expected. Katniss remembers that the mockingjay survived after the capital's engineered jabberjays failed to remain obedient. The recollection gives the pin a deeper weight, and you hear the past moving quietly through their conversation. Above the undergrowth, the branches arrange themselves like a roof made from thin green glass. Sunlight reaches you in narrow pools, warming one shoulder while leaving the other cool. A twig cracks somewhere beyond the clearing, but the sound is followed only by the steady tapping of a small bird. The mockingjay's call seems to hang in the air after the bird has flown, like a note lingering inside a wooden room. Rue's fingers pass lightly over the pin, and the metal catches a brief spark of brightness. Around your feet, clover and wildflowers press against the soil, their stems trembling whenever a breeze enters the trees. The woodland feels full of remembered voices. Their alliance soon takes the shape of a plan. The careers still possess food gathered around the cornucopia, and Katniss and Rue decide that the remaining supplies must be destroyed. Rue will use her knowledge of the forest, while Katniss will approach the stockpile and place explosive charges among the provisions. Neither girl speaks of triumph, because the intention is not to conquer the arena, but to remove one advantage from those who control it. You follow the logic of their plan through whispered details, counted steps, and glances towards the distant ridge. The careers have weapons, numbers, and confidence, while the two allies have patience, fire, and knowledge of where the darkness can conceal them. A slow wind moves through the branches, carrying the scent of resin from wounded pines. The forest floor is soft in places and brittle in others, changing beneath your boots from wet leaf mold to dry needles. You notice tiny fragments of bark scattered beside a root, each piece pale against the brown earth. Far away, a cannon has sounded, but the echo is softened by the trees until it resembles a door closing in another house. Katniss crouches near a moss-covered stone, and Rue waits among tall grasses where her outline becomes difficult to separate from the green. The light grows thinner as clouds pass overhead, leaving the clearing shaded and still. Katniss reaches the courier supplies and places the explosives with careful hands. Rue watches from a distant tree, ready to draw attention away when the charges have been set. The food catches fire, and the force of the explosion scatters sacks, fruit, jars, and metal containers across the ground. The remaining supplies are ruined, and the couriers lose the certainty that has protected them since the opening days. For you, the plan feels like a rare moment in which the arena's design turns against itself. The game makers provide abundance in one place, but Rue and Katniss answer by making that abundance impossible to possess. Smoke drifts through the trees in a low grey veil, carrying the bitter smell of burned grain and scorched canvas. Ash settles on leaves that had been bright only moments earlier, dulling their surfaces with a fine, powdery film. Beneath the smoke, the earth remains wet and dark, and mud gathers around roots exposed by the blast. A few torn flowers lie near the edge of the clearing, their petals blackened along one side. From the distance comes the faint clatter of metal, followed by shouting that gradually moves away. You stand in the shelter of the forest, while the ruined supplies cool beneath the open sky, and the air slowly recovers its natural scents. The plan succeeds, but the arena offers no gentle continuation afterwards. Rue is caught in the open by Marvel, the male tribute from District 1, whose spear finds her before Katniss can reach her. The attack is sudden, and the small alliance that had seemed so carefully protected is broken within a few terrible seconds. Katniss strikes Marvel, and he dies, yet the victory cannot balance what has happened. Rue lies wounded beneath the trees, and Katniss kneels beside her with a grief that no longer resembles ordinary fear. The arena changes at that instant, becoming not only a sequence of tasks, but also a place of remembrance. The afternoon has dimmed into a softer green, as if the forest itself has drawn a curtain over the clearing. You hear leaves brushing against one another above your head, producing a long, whispering texture without any distinct words. Rue's breathing grows faint, and the clear bird call above the trees returns once, almost impossibly pure. Katniss's hands tremble near the wound, while Marvel's weapon rests discarded in the mud. The flowers around Rue remain bright despite the trampled ground, with white petals, yellow centers, and slender stems bent by passing feet. A cool current moves over your face, carrying away the heat of the fight, but not its meaning. Katniss sings to Rue as she dies. Her voice is quiet and clear, rising from the forest floor with the tenderness of a song remembered from home. You remain beside them while the melody passes through the branches, and Rue listens until her eyes close. The sound gives shape to the farewell, allowing affection to exist where the capital expects only spectacle. Katniss is no longer acting simply to survive, although survival still waits beyond the clearing. Her song becomes a declaration that Rue has a name, a history, and a place in another person's memory. The light gathers along the edges of Rue's face, touching her dark hair with a muted bronze color. Insects continue their slow movement over the grass, indifferent to the cannon that announces her death. A small feather lies near a patch of clover, blue-black, where its surface catches the shade. The breeze carries the last traces of Katniss's voice towards the distant ridge. Around the still body, stems and leaves lie flattened, while untouched wildflowers remain upright beyond the circle of struggle. You sense the strange calm that follows a final breath, when the world resumes its ordinary sounds, although one presence has vanished from it. Katniss decorates Rue's body with flowers after the attack. She gathers them from the surrounding ground and lays them across Rue's clothing, along her hands, and over her dark hair. The gesture is slow, deliberate, and entirely outside the rules of the contest. Wild flowers laid across dark hair make Rue appear surrounded by the colors of a living meadow rather than claimed by the machinery of death. The flowers make Katniss's grief visible to the watching districts, translating private sorrow into an image that can pass through the capital's broadcast. For the first time, the arena seems arranged around memory instead of competition. Petals brush against Katniss's fingers as she places each stem, and the crushed green scent rises from the soil. Some flowers have been torn from their roots, leaving pale threads of earth clinging to them. Others are newly opened, carrying a faint sweetness that survives beneath the smell of blood and damp leaves. You see a blue bloom resting near Rue's shoulder, with two white flowers tucked beside it like small lamps. The forest canopy has become almost black against the evening sky, while the clearing retains a narrow wash of fading gold. Somewhere above, a bird calls again, and the sound passes through the flowers without disturbing them. The districts watch the image of Rue covered in flowers, and their response reaches Katniss in a form she cannot immediately see. District 11 sends bread in response to Rue's death, a gift gathered and passed through unseen hands before it appears in the arena. The bread is not merely food, although hunger gives it immediate value. It becomes a quiet answer carried through the capital's own broadcast, crossing the boundary between spectators and participants. The viewers outside the capital are interpreting Katniss's actions, recognizing the meaning of her mourning and answering through the limited language available to them. The bread arrives with a wrapping that has traveled through many careful hands, bearing the pressure of fingers and the faint warmth of recent baking. Its crust is rough beneath your touch, while the inside holds a softness that belongs to kitchens, shared tables, and ordinary evenings. You smell grain, smoke, and the clean sweetness of flour warmed in an oven. The package rests against the green darkness of the forest like a small piece of home. No voice explains its journey, yet the bread seems to contain distant rooms, tired workers, and people who have watched the same screen in silence. Katniss receives District 11 bread and understands that Rue's death has entered the lives of people beyond the arena. The alliance between the two girls has become visible across distance, even though it existed only briefly among the trees. Katniss's mourning has also altered the meaning of her own presence, making her more difficult for the capital to present as a simple contestant. The romance narrative begins to merge with loyalty, mourning, and refusal. Every gesture now carries more than one meaning, and the game makers must consider how the districts will interpret whatever happens next. Night settles over the forest, bringing a cooler weight to the leaves and stones. The bread's rough covering softens where moisture gathers upon it, and its scent remains steady beneath the sharper smell of crushed stems. You hear the faint movement of small creatures in the undergrowth, followed by silence whenever a branch shifts overhead. The sky shows only a few pale stars through gaps in the canopy, while clouds move slowly across the darker spaces. Katniss sits near the flowers for a time, and the bread lies beside her in the grass. The scene contains food, grief, and distance, all held together by the quiet of the night. The game makers later announce that two tributes from the same district may win together. The rule changes the direction of Katniss's thoughts because Peter is injured and somewhere within the arena. She begins to search for him, choosing care even though the rules continue to demand competition. The memory of Peter's wounded body leads her through gullies, thickets, and muddy banks, while the announcement gives their partnership a new possibility. Katniss is no longer searching only for an ally who might improve her chances. She is seeking the person whose life has become bound to her own through promises, danger, and the gaze of the districts. Mist gathers over the stream, and turns every branch into a softened outline. Water slips around dark stones, making a sound like quiet speech heard through a wall. Mud and leaves around Peter's hiding place form an uneven cover, blending his body with the bank. The wet earth presses against your ankles, and small pieces of leaf cling to the fabric near your knees. A thin ribbon of sunlight reaches the water, illuminating suspended grains of sand beneath the surface. The forest smells of moss, cold clay, and distant smoke. You move carefully through the reeds, aware that a wounded person may be concealed within the landscape. Katniss finds Peter camouflaged near the stream, painted with mud, and leaves so thoroughly that he appears to be part of the bank. He is badly wounded, and his condition has grown worse while he remained hidden from the careers. At first, his face is difficult to distinguish from the earth around him, but his eyes open when Katniss approaches. The disguise has protected him, although it has also left him alone, fevered, and close to death. Katniss chooses care immediately, touching his shoulder and speaking to him with the steady patience Rue had once offered her. The stream moves beside Peter's hiding place with a cold, persistent brightness. Water beads on the broad leaves near his head, each droplet holding a tiny reflection of the grey sky. Mud darkens the folds of his clothing and fills the shallow marks left by crawling. When the breeze passes, the leaves release a damp, earthy fragrance that mingles with the faint medicinal smell of blood. You can feel the chill rising from the bank through your hands. Beyond the reeds, the trees stand close together, their trunks forming a quiet enclosure around two figures who have become important to one another. Katniss learns that medicine can be obtained through the feast arranged at the cornucopia. The supplies are intended to draw the remaining tributes into danger, and each district receives the promise of something it urgently requires. For Katniss, the medicine is the only realistic chance of keeping Peter alive. She prepares to leave him hidden near the stream, knowing that the couriers may be waiting around the central structure. Her decision is shaped by fear, yet it is also an act of loyalty, because she accepts danger on behalf of someone who cannot presently protect her. The path towards the cornucopia passes through grass, flattened by many feet and soil, hardened beneath repeated movement. Night air rests low over the arena, carrying the metallic scent of weapons and the faint odor of spilled fuel. Somewhere beyond the trees, a cable hums against a concealed mechanism, then falls silent again. You hear water behind you growing fainter as Katniss moves away from Peter's hiding place. The cold gathers around your wrists, while the ground remains soft beneath each cautious step. Ahead, a pale glow marks the cornucopia, and the metal structure reflects the artificial light like a distant moon. At the feast, Katniss obtains the medicine through a dangerous exchange of speed, deception, and precise movement. She reaches the pack prepared for District 12, secures the treatment, and escapes the immediate reach of the waiting tributes. The arena has turned care into a form of combat, forcing Katniss to fight for supplies that will not strengthen her own body. She returns to Peter with what he needs, and the medicine begins to pull him back from the edge of death. Their shared shelter becomes a small center of resistance against the contest's intended loneliness. Dawn arrives slowly beside the stream, whitening the mist before touching the upper branches. The medicine has a bitter scent, sharp enough to cut through the smell of wet leaves and stagnant water. Peter's breathing steadies by degrees, and warmth returns to his hands beneath Katniss's careful attention. You sit near the bank while the current carries tiny pieces of bark beneath the reeds. A clear bird call above the trees answers another from farther away, creating a fragile exchange across the woodland. The sound is not a message in the old sense, yet it recalls the mockingjays and the memories they preserve. Katniss and Peter become the final two tributes from District 12. Their survival appears to complete the story the capital has been shaping, with devotion placed carefully beside violence and the romance narrative held before the districts as an attractive spectacle. Yet the bond between them has grown through more difficult materials. It contains Rue's flowers, District 11 bread, Peter's wounds, and Katniss's repeated choice to protect another person. Their public image cannot be separated from these acts of loyalty, and the game makers discover that affection may become a language they do not fully control. The arena feels strangely spacious, with the other tributes gone, although no part of it has become safe. Wind moves across the empty paths, lifting scraps of cloth and turning dry leaves in narrow spirals. The cornucopia stands under a pale sky, its metal sides marked by soot, dust, and dull reflections of the two survivors. Near the stream, moss continues to thicken over stones, untouched by the attention of the cameras. You smell the fading smoke of the ruined supplies and the clean dampness of morning. Beneath both scents lies the bitter smell of crushed berries, waiting in the shadows of the final decision. The rule allowing 2 winners from one district is revoked. The announcement reaches Katniss and Peter when they have been brought to the edge of victory, and its purpose becomes unmistakable. The game makers intend to restore the contest's original shape, requiring one of them to kill the other before the audience. Instead, Katniss takes poisonous nightlock berries, and Peter understands what she is proposing. Together, they threaten to eat the berries, choosing death for both rather than allowing the capital to possess a clean and obedient ending. Nightlock lies dark and glossy against the surrounding leaves, beautiful in a way that offers no comfort. The berries are cool beneath your fingers, their skin stretched smooth and faintly reflective. When crushed, they release a bitter smell that seems to belong to cold soil and distant rain. Katniss and Peter stand close together while the hovercraft waits nearby, its cold metal surface exposed to the night air. Wind travels beneath the craft and raises a low vibration through the soles of your feet. The arena's artificial lights shine upon the berries, making their danger plain. For a moment, the staged contest becomes a public decision that the game makers cannot easily contain. Katniss and Peter are not merely refusing to kill one another, they are refusing the story prepared for them. Their threat gathers the earlier gestures into one final act, linking Rue's remembrance, the bread from District 11, and the care given to a wounded companion. The capital may call the act romantic, rebellious, foolish, or dangerous, yet no single description can hold it entirely. The berries make visible the quiet alliance that has been forming beneath the spectacle. The hovercraft feels colder as it prepares to lift them from the arena. Metal presses through the fabric beneath your hands, smooth in one place and scratched in another by years of use. The air carries the smell of oil, rain, and crushed nightlock, while the forest recedes into a dark border beyond the lights. Far below, streams, flowers, ashes, and hidden paths lie together beneath the fading machinery. Katniss keeps the berries near her hand, and Peter remains beside her. Above the trees, one clear bird call rises into the darkness, carrying song and memory beyond the arena.